Welcome back to the Board of Clackamas County Commissioners Policy Session. Gary, would you like to tee up the first issue?
Yes, thank you, Chair Smith. Our first session today is agrovoltaics, maybe? Agrovoltaics Innovation at the North Willamette Research and Extension Center, or NREC. We have staff from the Oregon State University, North Willamette Research and Extension Center, and our Business and Community Services staff. And I think Mike Bondi, are you kicking it off for everyone? Or Sarah? Whoever, come on forward, staff, please. And go ahead.
Who's online, Christina?
We have, for this policy
For this session?
Chad Higgins and Dan Orzek.
Thank you.
Good morning. Is my mic on?
Yes.
Good afternoon, I should say. Good afternoon, Chair Smith, Commissioners, Administrator Schmidt. My name's Sarah Eckman. I'm the Interim Director with Business and Community Services here at the county. And we're here today with our partners at Oregon State University, North Willamette Research and Extension Center, for them to bring you some information about their agrovoltaics project and initiative. It's an informational session for the OSU North Willamette Research and Extension Center to share about their project, offering you the opportunity to learn about it and support it. So Mike Bondi and his presenters will be leading you through the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Sarah, and good afternoon. My name is Mike Bondi. I'm the director at North Willamette Research Extension Center, and of course, we're the only agricultural experiment station that the university has that serves the needs of agriculture here in the entire Willamette Valley. And I might just say, I know many of you know, we're located right across from Charbonneau on Miley Road. We're a 160-acre research farm dedicated to research and development, education, and research for farmers. And we've enjoyed what is over an 80-year partnership with Clackamas County. You all, Clackamas County, own the land that we are on, and we have an agreement to use it for education and research. And part of my relationship with you all over the years is to keep you really informed of the major developments and things that we are doing so that you're aware of them, obviously, in the community, and we can work together to be successful. A project we want to talk with you about today really addresses one of the most critical issues we're all facing, and it's energy. Energy in all of our life, but certainly in agriculture, is a huge issue. And what we're going to present today is the ideas for a innovative research initiative that combines commercial agriculture with energy production on the same land and integrates those all together to create what we call a closed loop. So with us today are two people online. Dr. Chad Higgins is an associate professor at Oregon State University in Corvallis in the Biological, Ecological, and Engineering Department. And Dan Orzek is the manager of Oregon Clean Power Cooperative. So with that, I believe Chad will be first up. And we've got a short little PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll have questions.
While that's being brought up, I should also mention the Department of Transportation and Development is also joining us today, especially the Sustainability Division, because of their work on the community solar with OSU.
Dan, can you share your screen with the slides?
Yeah. Sorry, it'll take me just a moment.
If not, I have them pulled up. I just wasn't sure.
Sorry, we didn't coordinate on this, but I've got them.
Well, that's going to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you for having us here, Chair Smith and commissioners. And it's a pleasure to be with you here today to talk about my research and plans for the future of that research. I've dedicated my adult life to helping make agriculture more sustainable, both economically for our family farmers, but also environmentally. And I think this is a step towards that. let's move on to the next slide, please. So the idea here is, if you actually look at most plants, at least agricultural crops, they don't require all the sun that they receive, even here in Oregon. And when plants receive excess sunlight, they try to maintain a constant temperature so they don't get too hot and shrivel up and die. And they do that by sweating out moisture through transpiration. What we have then is an excess of energy that can be harvested and packaged as a farm good if you engineer the system to do such. So taking away just the right amount of sunlight so that the plants still receive their full allocation that's required, but no more. And that's done by finding shade fractions and designing systems properly. Those plants actually produce more food, and it's of a higher quality, according to the research we've done. They use less water in the process because they're not using that to stay cool. And there's even a feedback loop to the solar panels that are just like any other computer device or electronic device, that the microclimate created by those plants cools the panels and they become slightly more efficient and produce more energy. So what we're seeing is a real win-win-win situation. And to the left there, you see one of our trials, one of our ad hoc trials in a solar array that was never designed for this. Next slide. Just a few data points. Here we have our dry biomass, so the amount of productivity of the area that we partially shaded was roughly double of the control area. So we were able to really increase the productivity of that land, and this is non-irrigated land. Next slide, please. We've also looked at things like the effect on pollinators and on livestock. So when we looked into and did a full research study on pollinator habitat, we saw that there were more flowers, particularly in the late season during the pollen desert times within the solar area for our native pollinators. And the sheep actually preferred, unsurprisingly, to hang out under the solar panels and preferentially ate the grass only under the solar panels. And it didn't impact the live weight gains at all. They grew at the same rate, whether they were under the panels or without. Extrapolating this out, you can take our numbers and make some pretty amazing claims that we've actually published under peer review, because you can do the calculation yourself, and we released all the code to do that. But this practice, if only 1% of the global cropland were to adopt it, it would offset the entire global energy demand. Now, of course, there's a lot of caveats to that. You know, sun only shines during the day. There's transmission. There's many engineering challenges. We're just talking about an energy order of magnitude here. In the U.S., we consume a little bit more energy than the global average. So the same 1% would only offset our entire, or would allow us to reach all of our sustainable energy targets, and at a actual budget cost of 1% of the annual budget of the U.S. And of course, once we have an excess of energy from farms, we can repurpose that energy to make agriculture more sustainable. An electric tractor is a great example of that. Next slide, please. So that picture you saw, there's a current trial there at the existing solar prioritizing array at NREC. And the question is, you know, we were able to do all this research in arrays that were never designed for this. They were designed to harvest as much electricity as possible, and they didn't consider access of machinery or agricultural practice. So can we be more purposeful designing a system to optimize the benefits that we've identified? And that's what we're planning to do. We would like to build a purpose-built research facility, research infrastructure, so that we can get those parameters needed to do the engineering optimization and figure out how to make this as economical and profitable as possible for our Oregon growers. And if that's the next slide is, here is a overview of the technical plan, which is where I will hand it off to Dan Orzek.
Thanks, Chad. Madam Chair, members of the commission, thank you for having us today.
You bet.
My name is Dan Orzek. I'm the general manager of the Oregon Clean Power Co-op, and we are handling the solar side of this project. Essentially, what we're doing is providing OSU with a free solar array so that Chad and his colleagues can do research. So what we're trying to do here, what you see here is us trying to replicate the most common commercial solar setups so that we do research that's actually practically useful. So you can see there are solar arrays running in two directions. These are the most common configuration for commercial solar projects nowadays. They're trackers, so they track the sun from east to west. They're standard height, about chest high. And then the ones running where the rows run east to west are south facing, fixed, so they don't move. And the only difference between these and other solar arrays you may see around, for example, the existing ones there along Miley Road, are that they are elevated so that we can do farming operations, agricultural operations underneath them. So the research plan here is that Chad will plant various crops in these two different types of arrays underneath and between them. And then you see these open areas here. These are the control areas, so they'll actually plant the same crops there and be able to do apples to apples, so to speak, comparisons. A little bit about us. We are a member-owned co-op. In fact, we're the only member-owned co-op in the country that's a statewide member-owned co-op that's focused on renewable energy. And so we're a co-op just like ag co-ops and food co-ops that you're familiar with. But what we do is we allow our members to invest in community solar projects. So what we've done to date, we've done about 20 projects for schools, libraries, churches, nonprofits, local governments around the state. We just finished a project for Benton County. We have a number of projects besides this one in the works with OSU. And the community, the financing for this project, you'll be glad to hear we're not asking the county for any money. OSU will be putting up a little bit of money for some of the fencing and so on. The rest of it will come from members of the community, meaning any Oregon resident who chooses to invest in the project, and probably some other sources, Banner Bank, for example, we've been in discussions with, and they're very eager to finance part of this project. So the financing gets the project built. And then the question is, where does the power go? Well, you know, there's already a solar system at Nwarek, and that supplies the power used on site. So we can't put the power from these solar panels into the existing buildings there. Fortunately, Oregon has a new program called Community Solar, which allows us to connect the solar panels directly to the grid, and then with the utility as the mediator, as the billing middleman, anyone in any PG customer can subscribe or sign up, buy the power. And we expect to be able to do that at a 5% discount. The advantage, of course, is that people and organizations who can't put solar on their own roof, for example, renters, or people whose income doesn't allow them to afford solar panels on their own roof, can sign up for clean renewable energy. This is a little bit about how it works. You sign up, you're actually purchasing the power. It's just as if you're getting the power from your roof, except it's located somewhere else. As I mentioned, the utility does the billing work under the rules set out by the Oregon PUC. And then the savings difference we estimate to be 5%. So we have a number of organizations and individuals who want to sign up. OSU will take most of the power. We expect that there will be some left over if county or or residents or organizations in the county want to take some of it, we'll be happy to have them make it available to them as well. And that's the end of our presentation. So we're happy to take questions.
Commissioners, do we have any questions or observations so far? Could you go back one? Yeah, on the second to the last slide, it says, how does community solar work? And it says that subscribers can receive a credit, but subscribers also pay fees. To me, that's counter to what? But you end up saving 5%. Why do we need to, why do we pay a fee? Why do we receive a credit? I understand, I guess, signing up to receive solar power and I get a credit on my bill, right? I don't know why we need to do that. Why don't they just disperse it
Good
out there?
question. Dan, I think that's for you. You're the expert.
Yes, ma'am. Good question. So this is how, so first of all, community solar is, I think exists in something like 39 states now. Colorado's program I know has been running for about 6-7 years. Oregon's program took a number of years to get launched. It's basically a model on these other programs. The way it works is you get a credit on your bill. That number was set by the Oregon PUC. Then someone has to pay for the project. So what we do is, let's say, well, the credit in PG is 11.2 cents a kilowatt hour, and roughly 95% of that will go back to pay for the project. In this particular case, that would go to Banner Bank and or members of the community who put up the money up front. So that difference there, that delta, is about 5%. So you sign up for community solar and you will get that power at about 5% less than you're currently paying the utility.
I see a light on, Christina.
Commissioner Savas has his hand raised.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. First of all, I'm read the packet. It's I'm just fascinated by this. This is just a really cool thing. So the interesting question I have is, what crops are ideal for this and what crops are not? I mean, what common food crops would people resonate with that could be grown in this environment?
Okay,
So,
good question. Yeah, Chad, I think that one's for you.
Thank you. That is an excellent question, and I'm not going to dodge it, but I'm going to say one of the reasons we're doing the research is for that very question, because I have all kinds of growers asking me what would be the best. Our preliminary research indicates that things like root vegetables and leafy greens, small fruits like blueberries and raspberries, those are the things that would be probably the best in Oregon. It will also work pretty well with grass and grass seed production, but we're going to have to spread out the panels a little more to get the harvest equipment through for that particular one in a commercial sense.
And I think we're also, are we not, Chad, curious about what the opportunities will be in the nursery
That's right.
ornamental horticulture realm, which is our largest sector of agriculture here in Oregon.
That's right. Thanks, Mike, for reminding me. We're also looking at container crops, ornamentals, and other nursery crops, particularly high-value shade crops that are just a perfect match for this. I can also say I would love to check some of the other very high-valued shade-loving commodities like ginseng and golden seal. These seem to be very, very, very profitable in this situation, but it takes 4 to 7 years to complete a trial on that. So we shall see when that's finished.
Great. The other question I have is more financial, and that is, if someone was to, an investor or a bank, whatever, invest in this energy and set up, acquire whatever acreage is needed to break even, to make it benefit, putting aside the food and the agriculture aspect of it, just simply the energy production, how many years is there before there's a payoff? Is it like on a 20-year schedule or 30-year schedule before it's paid off and in the black?
Well, again, not to dodge the question, but it really does vary. Your return is going to be shorter if you're in Eastern Oregon or Southern Oregon because you've got, 30, 40% more sun. It also depends on the utility. Part of the reason the co-op was set up, this community financing mechanism, was that it's hard to do solar projects in Oregon because we have relatively low power rates. So we're blessed with a lot of cheap hydro. Move this project to California or the East Coast where they pay, 15 cents a kilowatt hour for power. It'd be a lot easier to do.
Okay. What's the typical investment, the cost to put a solar array on a property and expect some kind of a scalable, I won't say scalable, but a project in which could get some return on investment, let's just say 20 years. How many acres, what kind of investment is needed?
Yeah. So again, varies. So this project, for example, is about a $1.1 million budget. That's probably a little higher than it would be if it was not a research project for a number of reasons. One is it's raising the solar panels is more expensive, need more steel, and so on. We're essentially breaking even on this project in about 10 years. So, good conditions somewhere else without the research component, maybe 7 to 8 years.
Okay. And the total acres needed to make that happen?
Well, again, it depends. So this is about, it's a 6-acre project, about half of it's solar panels. The reason it depends is because it depends where the power goes. So, if it goes into your building, then it's just limited by how much power you use and your acreage. If it goes into the community solar program, there's basically 2 tiers. One is in the roughly 1 to 2, 1 to 3 acre range. The other is in the roughly, let's say 12 to 15 acre range.
Yeah, thank you. I'm extremely interested in this. This is really cool.
Thank you, Paul. We're running short on time here. Just 2 quick acknowledgements here. I'm reading the press release from Mike Bondi dated January 8th of this year, and you answered a couple of my questions. As a farmer myself, I was concerned about how to do equipment, how you're going to harvest. Are you going to rely on hand harvesting? Or it sounds like you have a design in mind for that. See, what was the other one? And water. Water is such a high commodity. The more and more houses that are built in our countryside, the more wells that are drilled, and the more the water tables, could be going down, and the difficulty in drilling for agricultural wells, and that whole thing. I do find it interesting from that point of view on water conservation. Would help our farmers in that as well.
Well, I think if we look at the long-term future of agriculture in this region as well as other parts of the country, energy and how we utilize energy is going to become more and more important. I think, you're right. For irrigation in an agricultural setting, we use more water in agriculture than any other use of water in this state. And of course, a lot of that is driven with pumps.
Yep.
And so there's an electrical component there. And as Chad said before, the other thing that I think we're also intrigued by is the closed loop nature of being able someday to move into electric tractors instead of fossil fuel driven tractors, and then being able to farm during the day, plug in at night, recharge, away you go. There's huge potential. None of this is known. There really isn't a research facility like what's being planned for NREC anywhere in the world.
Yeah, and you notice
so it's
in
gonna be cutting
Oregon,
edge.
whereas Oregon has a lot of rain every year, we don't get it when the crops need it. In the summer during our growing season, we tend to go into drought situations, and we're just dumping water on our crops. We have one more comment in there. Is that from who?
Commissioner Fisher.
Fisher, Commissioner Fisher.
Yes, thank you for being here, really interesting. The competition between, do you have solar farming or agricultural farming, and this is a way to sort of marry those two. I'm curious, I'm looking at the picture, which was in the very first slide, and it shows the crops and then the solar panels. When you do this, is there land, it looks like there is land that's taken out of production because of the solar panel. I'm wondering how much agricultural land, I'm wondering if my assumption is correct and if you do lose land for
So-
farming by doing this.
So in that particular example, the answer is yes. And that is partly because that is what I would call a solar prioritizing array. It was never designed for agricultural access. So we are limited, mostly because of equipment. I've actually hand-grown stuff in the area underneath and it's possible, but it's such a pain in the butt that nobody would ever want to do it.
Nobody wants to bend over and be crouched down for that long.
Exactly, exactly. So the designs that we have elevate the panels and arrange them in such a way that you can get equipment fairly close to the support structure, a single pole support structure. So you are still losing a little bit of farmland in the configurations because you have sort of almost a line of fence posts. You can imagine that that are supporting those solar arrays. So as much as a fence line would take out, a cross fence line would take out in your field, that's what this would take out.
So with that in mind, we can only imagine what that discussion would be, because we do have land use regulations in this state that relate to use of land for purposes of solar energy or energy production. So what we're trying to get to here is a way to maximize the potential of both and integrate the two together on the same ground.
Okay, I don't see any more comments. I want to thank Mike Bondi and all of the participants today who have come in. Mike, it doesn't sound like you are cruising on your retirement. You're back here working, it looks like. I want to thank you for that. We have relied on you for many, many decades in the agricultural community, and thank you for your service on that.
Thank you. Well, it's been a great ride, and we look forward to keeping you up to date on this project as we go forward. Hopefully, by later in the summer or by fall, we'll have something on the ground to actually look at.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're going to go to our next session, Gary.
Yes, thank you, Chair Smith. Next is the Budget Committee meeting of the Budget Committee, your next policy session. The public members are on Zoom, and the others are in the room, so we'll give a moment for Christina to bring the public members in.
And while she's bringing those in, maybe it's a good idea we can take roll call to know who's present today.
Yes, absolutely. So on Zoom, Commissioner Savas.
Here.
In the room, Commissioner Fisher.
Here.
Commissioner Schrader.
Here.
Commissioner Shull. Here. Chair Smith.
Here. And we'll take a roll of the public members when they come on.
Yep.
I'm going to run into my office real quick. I'll be
Okay.
right back. Let's see.
Need any help? Need the names?
And Sean will not be joining us today.
Yeah. She the only one?
She's the only one that we've heard from.
Can I help you? Can I read them to you?
Yeah, if you can. please.
Tom Feely,
Okay. Thank you.
Ann Lee,
Got her?
Jan Lee,
Let me grab Jan. Okay,
Wilda Parks,
got her,
Sandra Montoya.
got her.
Who else from your staff?
That's it.
Oh, that's it.
We have everybody in now.
All right. Would you like to wait a minute for Commissioner Fisher to return, Chair Smith?
Yeah, we'll just wait 1 minute.
And actually, Heather, who is the compensation chair?
Who?
Elisa Grandy, will be joining too.
Oh, Blaze, if you.
Oh, Blaze,
Okay.
please. Okay. All right. We'll start in just a minute, everyone.
Who are you?
I'm Heather Pedersen.
Heather, I'm sorry I don't recognize you with your mask on.
No, it's okay.
Do we have any other staff on Zoom, Gary?
Sandra is on Zoom, the budget manager.
Sandra is, okay.
And Blaze.
Sandra Montoya?
Yep. All right. We are ready if you're ready, Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, hello, everyone. Welcome. This is the meeting of the Budget Committee, the last meeting before you begin your budget deliberations in May. I'm Gary, the County Administrator. We'll start with introductions. And so in the room, I've already taken roll call for the commission members of the committee. I'll ask Christina to help me. She'll call your name for the public members of the committee, and if you would introduce yourself, please. Go ahead, Christina.
Okay, first member Ann Lee.
I'm here.
Introduction.
That's fine.
Okay. Wilda Parks.
Thank you. Yes, Wilda Park, citizen member.
Thank you. Jan Lee.
Jan Lee, citizen member.
Excellent. Tom Feely.
Tom Feely here, a citizen member from unincorporated North Clackamas County.
Excellent.
Great, thank you. And Sean Caldwell is also a public member, and she's not able to be with us today. Sandra Montoya is our budget manager. She is on Zoom. Blaze Riggins is senior budget analyst. He is on Zoom. Elizabeth, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Elizabeth Comfort, Finance Director here at Clackamas County.
Fantastic. So that is the group. If we may get started, we do have an agenda that's in your packet. We'll get as far as we can in, wow, we have 1 hour total. We'll get as much done as we can in that time. So first, Compensation Board for elected officials. Heather Pedersen from Human Resources will present along with the chair of the Compensation Committee. While you're getting started, I have a few quick things to add. Budget Committee members, last year, you agreed that this conversation would occur before the budget hearings begin, so that if you agree to any changes, they would be incorporated in the proposed budget that you receive. In prior years, you actually held this meeting during the budget hearings, but it was confusing because then staff had to redo the entire budget literally overnight to accommodate any salary changes you made. So that is why last year, the Budget Committee agreed to do this year prior. If you disagree, then next year we can go back to the old way, but that's why you're doing it at this meeting in April. You have received the staff report in advance. I know Heather's about to present, but I'm going to just give things to tee off for you members first. With great respect, I will say, this is really not the place to have any conversations about any individual elected officials and their salary and whether they should get it or not. That is not the purview or purpose of this committee, so please don't have that conversation. Next, really your charge today for the report you're about to receive from the Compensation Board is either you approve the recommendation, you reject the recommendation, or you may make modifications. And my opinion is, and I know you haven't presented it yet, but I recommend you approve the recommendations. One, we can afford it. The total increase amount is $151,000. We have the funds. If any individual elected official chooses not to accept their increase, you can donate that to charity. It's entirely your call. But this is really about the position, not the person. And all of these positions have been underfunded for so long, you're way behind the scale, which is why these percentages are quite high this year. I know you're going to hear this presentation. I just wanted to tee that off. And I do recommend that the COLAs, cost of living increases, that you do be consistent with elected officials, that is consistent with every other employee at Clackamas County. Every employee at Clackamas County is on the same COLA system. Every bargaining unit, every collective bargaining unit. So you would simply be in line with every single other employee at Clackamas County. So that's my opinion to share with you, to think about as you hear the report. So with that, thank you for indulging me. Heather, would you please go ahead?
Thank you, Gary. Good afternoon, commissioners and Citizen Budget Committee members. My name is Heather Pedersen. I'm the county's Classification and Compensation Manager. I want to introduce real quickly the citizen members of the Compensation Board for elected officials. Lisa Grandy, she is here via Zoom today to present as well. She served as the chair this year. It's her 4th year on the Compensation Board. Colleen Wilson was her 3rd year on the Compensation Board. And Melissa Fireside served her 1st year on the Compensation Board. I know that this Budget Committee has already received the Compensation Board's recommendations, and Elisa and I are here to just outline the process, the recommendations, and answer any questions that you might have. First, the Compensation Board for elected officials is guided by Oregon Revised Statute 204.112, which outlines the annual process for county compensation boards and gives those boards authorities to review the compensation of elected officials and make recommendations to the county's budget committee. The statute provides general guidelines and considerations regarding how the Compensation Board determines their recommendations, including the review of comparable positions within the labor market and consideration of factors such as internal alignment and compression. The ORS also provides more specific direction related to the sheriff, which states that the sheriff's salary shall be fixed in an amount which is not less than that for any member of the sheriff's department. So I want to note this year that there is a change in the Compensation Board's philosophy related to that language. Historically, the Compensation Board has interpreted that ORS language to mean that the sheriff shall make at least $1 more per month than the highest paid undersheriff, which the sheriff currently does make $1 more per month than the highest paid undersheriff. And you'll note this year that the Compensation Board has redefined and expanded their definition of salary compression for those elected officials who oversee county departments. The Compensation Board is now recommending a 10% spread between those elected positions and their non-elected second-in-command employees. So you'll see that in the recommendations this year. The methodology adopted by the county's Compensation Board includes collecting market data from comparable jurisdictions and adjusting that data where it's appropriate. The labor market used by the Compensation Board includes Clark, Deschutes, Lane, Marion, Multnomah, and Washington counties, the cities of Portland and Vancouver, and Metro. Just as a reminder, as Gary mentioned, the Compensation Board's recommendations for fiscal year 2021 were not approved by the Budget Committee. This year, the Compensation Board took a three-pronged approach in making their recommendations. First, market adjustments were recommended where elected positions were more than 1% below the market average. Second, compression adjustments for 2 positions were recommended based on internal alignment with those elected officials second in command. And while the Compensation Board has always considered the salaries of second in command, this year, as I mentioned, the Compensation Board has identified a desired spread for the purposes of alleviating internal compression. And third, the cost of living adjustment. The Compensation Board has recommended a COLA based on the CPI, and as Gary mentioned, that is what's budgeted for all employees, the same cost of living increase and the same CPI. So that brings us to the Compensation Board's recommendations. For fiscal year 21-22, the Compensation Board's recommendations are intended to bring those positions that are below market average to market parity or to address concerns where there is compression with the second in command, as defined by the Compensation Board. As outlined in the full report the Budget Committee received from the Compensation Board, it is recommended that all elected officials receive a 1.8% COLA this year. In addition, the Compensation Board recommends market or compression salary adjustments for the following elected positions. For clerk, the clerk was found to be 6.2% below market this year. So in addition to the cost of living increase, the Compensation Board is recommending a 6.2% increase for a total of 8%. This year, the commissioner was 7.7% below market, and the Compensation Board is recommending a 7.7% increase in addition to COLA for a total of 9.5%. This year, the district attorney is 0.7% below market average. However, there is salary compression with the second in command, whose salary is currently 2.7% above that of the district attorney. So what you're seeing is a recommendation of approximately 50% for the district attorney's salary, and that is based on the Compensation Board's new recommendation related to achieve that 10% spread between the elected and their second in command. And as you may recall, the state pays the majority of the district attorney's salary. So just 30% of the DA's total salary is paid by the county. The recommended increase is only on the county's portion of that total salary. But they're looking at the total overall increase. So while they're recommending a 13% increase to the total overall and a 1.8% COLA of 14.8% to the total overall, when you look at just 30% of that salary, it's approximately 56.3% on the total, or excuse me, on the county portion. The justice of the peace was found to be 14.9% below market this year. So in addition to the COLA, the Compensation Board is recommending a 14.9% increase for a total of 16.7%. The sheriff is not below market this year. However, the Compensation Board is recommending a 10% increase to achieve a 10% spread between the elected and their second in command. As I mentioned, the sheriff is currently making that $1 more per month than the highest paid undersheriff as per the Compensation Board's previous guidelines. And finally, in addition to a COLA, a 3.2% increase is recommended for treasurer. The treasurer was 3.2% below market, and so that is a total of a 5% increase for treasurer. And I'm going to open it up for questions. I know you might have some, but before we do that, I'd really like to take a moment to thank the citizen members of the Compensation Board for elected officials. They met over 5 weeks. They had 5 meetings. They put a lot of thought and consideration into these recommendations, and I'd like to thank them. I'd also like to thank HR staff, Nina Smith and Aaron Brayman, who spend a lot of time beforehand to collect and assemble all the information that they present to the Compensation Board each year. So thank you very much.
Heather, I have a question. I'm not sure if it's for you or the chair of the Compensation Board. You mentioned that you studied different jurisdictions and different counties. However, when you applied those metrics to these positions, not all jurisdictions applied to all positions.
Right.
Why was that?
I think what you're referring to is that for some elected positions, the Compensation Board has determined that some jurisdictions have matches and some don't. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, yeah, I just noticed as reading through, these counties were applied to the justices of the peace.
Right.
And then we come down with a different metric. A different batch of counties were applied to commissioners, for instance.
Right.
And specifically, our county assessor raises a question, why was Clark County used as a metric for her when Oregon state taxation is extremely more complicated and we don't really have the similarities involved with Washington State and Clark County as we do is applying all the different taxing methods and opportunities and deductions and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm concerned about.
Sure. No, that's a good question. The Compensation Board, so every 3 years, HR staff conduct a pretty thorough market and match analysis of all of the positions in all of these cities and counties that we match to. And we provide that information to the Compensation Board for elected officials to revisit on a system every 3 years the matches that are used. If something changes with an elected position that we learn during one of the off years, we will share that information with the Compensation Board. Sometimes there are new members that come on and have questions related to matches. And so every year they do revisit those matches. Specifically related to Clark County, Clark County has been used as a match for some time. It's been revisited and reaffirmed as a match. And I would say the Compensation Board, and I'll let Elisa speak to specifics as well, but I do know that they like to include matches, as many matches as they can, because that provides more viable information for a market study. Specific to Clark County, I do know that the current assessor did visit the Compensation Board the year before last in 2019 to share those same comments that you shared about Clark County, and that is common for elected officials to come and talk about, you know, their work and the matches and things like that. So it's not for me to tell the compensation board necessarily what matches to use or not to use, but to provide as much information as we can.
Let's have Alyssa Grandy. Are you online?
I am. I'm here.
Yeah, would you like to take a stab at that?
We are provided the information and are able to request additional information from the HR comp staff. And Clark County, along with the other counties that we consider a match, is identified as having primarily similar functions. When those functions change, generally we get that information from the staff, and we are able to consider it, as well as Heather said, revisiting every 3 years whether or not those are specific matches. If there are particular concerns specific to Clark County, then by all means, that's something we can consider for next year. But in terms of information that we utilize, that was considered to have similar functions, therefore making it a match.
Thank you very much for that. Christina, I see a red light on.
Yes, Commissioner Chavez has his hand up.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, hello, everyone. Nice to meet some of you I've never seen before or met before. And I want to thank the Compensation Board for their work. And anything I say, here on is please don't take it or any reflection upon your work. It's something that I historically have struggled with when it comes to elected officials' compensation, and especially the commissioners more so than the other elected officials. And historically, just for the record, I've also voted against each and every increase. So I just don't feel as though that we are elected on our qualifications, so to speak. One of the past chairs said we're generalist, and so this new approach, looking at the second in command, I'm a little bit concerned about it in that it's kind of a slippery slope. I mean, at the county level, for the county commissioners, I'm not really sure who would be the second in command comparable. Would it be the administrator? And if so, then, we are, if you look at that salary match, the salary of the administrator is significantly higher than that of commissioners. And I'm not suggesting that we raise it at or above the administrator. But one thing I wanted to just kind of add, there are some unique benefits to being a second in command, if you will, and not an elected official. Number one, I think if not all of them, they're probably on contract. So there's really, they have a severance package. They have vacation pay. They usually, to get to that position, they usually have education requirements. So those are four, just off the cuff there, four advantages or situations in which, an elected official doesn't experience, nor is an elected official required to have any kind of special training or education in the particular field. There is an exception or two, I understand, with the district attorney and the sheriff. But for the most part, one can have no experience in that field and get elected to that position, and yet the second in command has other benefits. So I just struggle with that. That's just my commentary. I don't really have a question, but again, I do appreciate your work. I understand the statutory charge that you're for the elected compensation. I appreciate the work. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
If I may respond, the commissioners specifically are exempted from the 10% compression discussion because of the unique job responsibilities of the administrator. So that concern, I hope we can put to rest for you. Secondly, just if I can speak on behalf of my compensation board peers, and let you and the rest of the room know that we take our responsibility very seriously. And as such, we find it critical to represent our county citizens in saying that this is really important to us. Our elected officials work diligently to keep us safe and to promote positive community priorities and to make Clackamas a thriving place to live. We recognize that much of the work of our elected officials is done after hours on top of full work days. We also recognize that despite the fact that there may not be specific job requirements, that in order for the county to continue to attract and motivate and retain candidates with broad and diverse life experiences, compensation must remain competitive in the marketplace.
Thank you for that, Alyssa. I appreciate that. Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Smith. I want to piggyback on some of your questions regarding the county clerk. I really appreciate you bringing that up, but I'm curious, my understanding is that Multnomah and Washington counties were not considered in the assessor. Thank you. Thank you, Gary. The assessor's compensation. I just want to make sure that that's correct.
That is correct. This year, so historically, again, the compensation board has taken a look at the matches. In 2019, the board added Washington County as a match, where historically it had not been a match for some time. And so Multnomah County and Washington had been matches for the last 2 years. This year, the compensation board revisited that, and due to what they saw as a different scope and size to those two jurisdictions, they decided to remove those two as matches. Again, I'll let Elisa speak to that, but one of the things that was pointed out is that both Multnomah and Washington County have similar assessment and taxation responsibilities, absolutely. In addition to that, they have some responsibilities that you would see with our county clerk. So my understanding is that at Washington County, the Director of Assessment and Taxation, who is not an elected official, is also over their elections and recording, Board of Property Tax Appeals that you would see in our county clerk's office. And at Multnomah County, they also have a non-elected county assessor who is also responsible for things like marriage licenses, passports, and records, and things like that. So,
thank you for that.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the explanation of the years and going back and doing that. So I am good with supporting these recommendations, especially, and I appreciate, Gary, you mentioning, because I know that for each of us individually and personally, we have our own internal conflicts about concern about our community, concern about how much people have struggled. It is very awkward in having to support your own raise, essentially. But truly, this is not about any one of us as an individual. It's about the position, and we need to promote and preserve the integrity of government. So I am good with moving forward with that. I also would just like to, I believe in the autonomy and the integrity of the compensation board, really appreciate that independent, thoughtful view. I would like to suggest that if the compensation board decides that it would like to revisit the clerk's, not the clerk, oh, I'm so sorry, the assessor's position in light of some of the concerns raised, then we could look at that, I'm pretty sure, as an adjustment later on, mid-year, like we do some of the other budget things. That's something that Gary Schmidt, Administrator Schmidt, had suggested, if that's the purview of the compensation board. I don't want to meddle there. I don't think that's our place, but I thought I would just make that suggestion.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. We have several commissioners and members who are in the queue who want to speak. It's my intent to let everybody be heard who wants to be heard, and then we will take action on this issue. Commissioner Schrader.
I just want to thank Commissioner Fisher for succinctly expressing what I am in alignment with. I think this is more about the position, not about the individual. I've been through this many times. I know it's awkward, but none of us is going to be here forever. And because of that, we have to make sure that the people that take this job or are elected to this job by our constituents really are the top-notch people that we need to have here in this position, as this commission is. So thank you, Commissioner Fisher. I concur with you, and I hope we get alignment.
Commissioner Scholl?
Yes, I was asked to pass on a question to you this afternoon. Was there a consideration or a sensitivity for the effects of COVID lockdown and slowdowns on the Clackamas County economy in the recommendations regarding pay increases and the COLA recommendation? And then the second one was for finance and budget. Could there be a concise statement explaining the justifications or need for the pay increases so people out in the county can look at it and have a understanding of why this is important? And finally, for Heather, could you define internal compression for me?
I will. So internal compression would be where there is little to no pay difference between and you would typically expect to address it in situations where you have positions within a career path that maybe, more levels of responsibility, higher levels of responsibility. You would see in some cases, we do have managers who might make less than their, staff. You might see that in technology. You might see that in engineering, where people have licensure certifications above that of the people that are in charge of managing the functions. But this compensation board was specifically looking at those departments where you have an elected official running a department, similar to what we have department directors doing here at the county, and their second in command who are responsible for running the department, on behalf of or in concert with the elected official. So just those elected positions, they were concerned about internal compression.
Okay.
Did you get all your questions, Sandra?
And on the first part, Heather, the first question.
Related to COVID and
a sensitivity to the experience,
Yes.
the economic experiences of the county.
The compensation board for elected officials did pose a question to all electeds this year about the impacts of COVID, the wildfire, and the various declarations of emergency that the county has seen in the last year. We had several elected officials did respond to those questions. I don't know, and I would ask Elisa to comment, but they weren't necessarily asking in relation to, I think they were very interested in learning how those things had affected their operations within their departments or within their authority. So Elisa, would you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Heather. It has always been the purpose and responsibility of this board to make the decisions and recommendations based on the factors that are contributing to what, excuse me, I apologize, in terms of what that job should be paid. Whether or not the finances are available, that's not our role. Our role is to fairly compensate the individuals for the job that's being done. I would suggest that the fact that the committee did not approve our recommendations last year was the sensitivity to COVID. And in fact, now these positions are further behind their peers. In terms of sensitivity to the results of COVID, as Heather mentioned, we did request information from various elected officials. We wanted to be clear, though, that it's not compensation for 1 year. It's compensation for the job, for the function, and for the role that they are doing. So our recommendations, therefore, reflect what the position deserves to be paid, not necessarily how that gets paid from the county.
Thank you. I see we have a light on. Is that Tom Feely in the queue?
Yes.
Unmute. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to agree with some things I heard. Heather, I'm really glad compression is considered this year. That's an important part of any compensation analysis. I've worked in public safety organizations where compression tended to be a strong disincentive for promotional opportunities. Like, why would I take this job? It only pays me 3% more, or, less than that, and have all these responsibilities. So I think it's critically important. And I agree that this is not about individuals. I mean, we can't let it be that, because what we're setting the county up is to be competitive into the future. With people applying or people running for these offices. A lot of people don't run for office to make that money, but yet people have to eat and support their families, so it's important. We did skip it last year. I think there's a danger in skipping it for more than a year, because we just fall behind, and next year, the year after, we're going to be looking at even bigger increases. So it's not going to get any easier if we delay it into the future. So I'm willing to support it. And Madam Chair, I'm willing to make a motion once everyone has asked all their questions.
Okay, thank you for that. Any more comments? I think, Sonia Fisher, do you have any more comments, or?
No, if Tom Feely would like to make the motion, I'm happy to second it.
Tom?
Okay, I would move that the Budget Committee accept the recommendation of the Compensation Board for elected officials as presented to us.
Second.
There's a motion on the table from Mr. Tom Feely to accept the recommendation, seconded by Commissioner Fisher. Is there any more comments or questions at this time?
Roll call?
Yeah.
Okay.
Call the poll, Christina, please.
Excellent. We'll start with the Budget Committee. Ann Lee?
Yes, I approve that.
Okay. Wilda Parks?
Yes.
Tom Feely?
Aye.
Jan Lee?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Savis?
Nay.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl?
No.
And Chair Smith?
No. Motion passes 6-3, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Anything further on this issue, Gary, or are we on to the next topic?
No, so thank you.
Madam Chair, can I just say one thing?
Yes, sir.
Very briefly, I just want to thank Heather. She always does a great job every year with this, and thank the Compensation Committee as well. This is a difficult issue. I've worked with compensation committees at probably 3 different governmental units. It's never easy. It's kind of a thankless task, but I appreciate everyone who was involved.
Well, Tom, I appreciate your comments on that. And for people in our position who are elected as commissioners, where we broadly represent our constituents, it's a tough decision to make, either to vote yay or nay. Because I want to support my fellow elected officials, who I do think some of them are grossly underpaid when you consider what some of our department directors are making. And it is really not right, because they have huge responsibilities to manage their departments in addition to being elected. Getting elected to a countywide office is very hard and it's very expensive. I do not advocate for government-paid campaigns at all, but for many of the comments that were made to me by our elected officials and members here, it's just a really sensitive issue, especially for our constituents who are listening out there, who are not making what they perceive to be a lot of money for the duties that we perform. I thank everybody for participating on this. And now, Gary, what's up next?
Yes, so we are going to add this then to the proposed budget that you'll be receiving in May. So we'll go ahead and do that. Thank you very much. Next, COVID-19 revenue and expense summary update. Elizabeth, is that you or Sandra?
Yes, I can address that. Thank you, Commissioner Smith and Commissioners and Gary.
Elizabeth, can I get you to pull that microphone closer to you? I think it's movable. And just kind of like, shout through your mask. Sometimes our masks take away our volume.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. On page 21 in your handout is an overall summary of our dollars that the county has received in efforts against the COVID impacts. And this includes our $17 million that we received in the CARES Act, I'm not sure if you have any questions on that. We just wanted to provide the dollars received to date and the expenditures. We're on a reimbursement plan.
Excuse me, you say page 17. I'm looking at two different page 17s, and it does not appear to be in my packet. I'm sorry about that.
21?
Page 21, yes. Page 21,
Oh, I have a Distinguished Budget Presentation Award.
yeah, I do too.
I do too.
We all have that. The distinguished budget, where is that at?
Finance
That was on page
officers.
21.
All right, it's in your packet immediately following the Compensation Board report. It's the next document that's titled COVID-19 Revenue and Expense Summary. So I'm sorry, please don't look at the page numbers, just look at that point.
There
and
it
you're done.
is. I'm sorry, Elizabeth. Please continue, because I scrolled all the way down.
I apologize.
I just guessed a number on my pages and I got it.
Oh,
So
thank you.
I think I'm magic today.
So we are on a reimbursement plan, so we spend the county funds and then seek reimbursement. That's why you see a deficit. That'll be caught up. The other question that we received from public member Tom Feely was on our American Recovery Plan funds that are coming in. So just to update the full budget committee, we're anticipating $81.1 million to come into the county. We have a committee that's made up of staff members across the county that are meeting weekly. Our first effort was to come up with a purpose statement. We know that there are a lot of needs throughout the county, and so we've proposed a purpose statement that we're presenting to Administrator Gary and then also to the board. And then from that, create a decision tree to receive the various requests, to make sure that we are fitting the requests into maybe proper tiers and needs throughout the county. So that is yet to come. We anticipate spending of the funds after July 1. We know that we're to receive the first 50% within 60 days, so that would be prior to the end of the fiscal year. And then prioritize those needs throughout the county, including disaster management preparedness for future unfortunate events to hit the county.
Okay, I see somebody in the queue. Is that Tom Feely? Mr. Feely?
You're on mute, Mr. Feely.
Forgot to unmute. Yeah. Anyway, I have a question for Elizabeth. Are we going to see this specifically somewhere in the proposed budget? Or is it going to be just sort of spread like tuna salad over the department?
We do not have it in the proposed budget for 21-22. We will anticipate having supplemental budgets as we receive the funds and then they're prioritized for use. And so as we don't have the plan for the expenditures at this point, we're waiting for those to be decided, and then we'll do a supplemental budget to incorporate them into the 21-22 plan, spending plan.
Okay, so we will never see it if it's in the supplemental because we're not part of that process, right?
Correct. It won't be part of the May Budget Committee hearings, but we certainly will include you in the supplementals going forward. We can
Okay, well,
keep you
that'd be
abreast.
good because it's a big chunk of change. So we'd at least like to know what's going on.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead with the presentation,
all-
please.
That's all I have on that budget agenda.
Yep, great. Next is general fund forecast. Go ahead, please, Elizabeth.
So on the next page, should I say that? I don't want to get caught up in page numbers. I apologize. Let's see here, it's attachment C. And this looks very similar to the forecast that we presented in February. We're having operational revenues and operational expenditures. And as you can see, below the second grouping, we do have a positive net balance from operating revenue minus operating expenditures. And then below that section, beginning with let me pull over here. Non-operating expense transfer to debt service, and then we have the projected library buildings and then courthouse. Those do put the current projected year into a negative of 1.7 million. And then going out a couple of years, you know, we're anticipating the courthouse expenditures. We'll be talking about that tomorrow in our morning work session at 10 a.m., talking about that affordability cost of the courthouse. And so those are factored in, the rough estimates are factored into that non-operating expense as well. So those are, in this proposal, projections, they are coming out of the beginning balance, not out of the operating.
So I do not have that forecast sheet in my information. I'm scrolling.
I'm trying to find it too.
None of us have that, Elizabeth. I'm sorry to.
And I couldn't find it in mine either.
Continue to scroll. We have a lot of stuff in here we probably don't need right now. Summary of revenue and expenses is the closest thing I get.
It is not in the 62 pages of the packet.
What?
It is not contained in the 62 pages of the packet that is online.
Yeah, that's what I'm finding. Is that Paul? That's what I'm seeing too. Okay, so put that back up, that forecast. Okay, so Elizabeth, the revenue less expenses, we have some red lines here. And those red lines are based on the fact if we were to build a courthouse and finance it. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. So the first negative 1.7 million in our projected
I find it hard to see.
I know.
budget. Do you see that column for?
I know, it's hard for us to see, but you know what? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the courthouse today. I just want the Budget Committee members to know that. And that is based on how much of a debt? Do you know that?
That's a big question, and I apologize, I don't have that at my
You
fingertips.
know, you don't need
for
to answer
today.
that to me today, but we will need those answers tomorrow morning.
Yes.
That is okay.
Yeah.
I just want to let the Budget Committee members know that if this board is to make a decision on a courthouse, we really need to look deep into our budget. And any of the citizens, members on this committee, if you have any 2 cents to offer us on how we go forward and affording a courthouse without raising taxes to the citizens, because it would have to go to a vote. We just can't arbitrarily raise taxes, property taxes, from this commission. And so with that in mind, I see somebody in the queue. Christina?
I have Sandra Montoya, Tom Feely, and then Commissioner Savas.
Okay, Sandra Montoya.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. I'm the budget manager, and I just wanted to point out on Monday afternoon, you received an updated packet in an email, and the updated packet has the forecast.
Okay.
So you may be looking at your original packet that was sent out the week before, and that indicated that the forecast would be coming this week.
Well, that's really confusing. Just a minute. Gary?
I will take responsibility. I'm sorry, Commissioners, you do not have it. It was emailed to you, but it was not posted online, and we did not draw it to your attention. I will take responsibility. I apologize. It was inadvertent, but you do not have it. So you'll definitely have it for tomorrow for your courthouse discussion. We'll make sure you have it by email here shortly, but I'm sorry, it was not posted as it should have been.
I see it.
That's
Okay,
on me.
but I just
take
found the
responsibility.
email.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it's in an email, and that's okay. You know, today's discussion is preliminary anyway. By the time we get to our real Budget Committee meetings, we'll have that. Christina, see, Tom Feely is next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, a year ago, we were talking about major budget reductions, and that doesn't seem to be where we are. I mean, I'm a little confused as to how we got to where we are today. So we're obviously not going to answer that today, but this is the last Budget Committee meeting before we are presented with the proposed budget. So I would ask that we start that process with a very clear explanation of what the departments were asked to do, what reductions have been made, and what the assumption is on the courthouse. I mean, that's been batted back and forth for a couple of years. You know, it's in, it's out, I don't even know anymore. So I'm not being critical. I just, in order to be a productive member of the Budget Committee, I think we need to know what assumptions are going into the budget, and that needs to be very clearly stated at the outset of our hearings.
Tom, I tend to agree with that, and we'll get that for you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, so I just want to go back to Chair Smith's original question on the red parentheses on that one line. I did not think that those negative numbers there, what's in red, was actually reflective of the courthouse, because I don't think we've even established what means of paying for it or not. So it would be a pretty big presumption for our finance staff to include that. So could Sandra or Elizabeth, can you actually verify that what's in red there is a result of the courthouse?
Elizabeth Comfort.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Savas. So in the projected column, we have under the courthouse capital, there's 2.6 million identified there. That is the county's match to the state's match of 50% of the efforts of exploring the courthouse costs and establishing with our consultants what could happen, the design, preliminary work. And so we have 2.6 million anticipated in next year. We have 1.3 million in this current year's budget expensed, and that's matched with the state dollars for a total of 2.6. And then next year it goes up to the county's portion is 2.6 million.
Okay, all right. So even though I'm not seeing, so what you're saying then, if you pull those numbers out on the courthouse capital, then the red was in parents under revenue less expenses will change dramatically.
Correct. And we are transferring those dollars to our capital projects fund. And so the activity of that we're expensing for the courthouse efforts won't show in the general fund, which this is a reflection of. It's a transfer to our capital fund. So what you see is a 2.6 transfer.
Okay, I can now see after, just opening this spreadsheet, I can see all the way to the right, there's this estimate of courthouse P3 cost. So that's under the P3 presumption.
Correct. The P3 model would actually be triggered upon further efforts, possibly after tomorrow's morning's discussion, if that is the decision. This is all the preliminary work to establish the direction that the county commissioners would like to go.
Gary Schmidt?
Okay.
Yes,
Gary.
Commissioners, because you have 7 minutes left and we really want to get to more items on this, can we move on from this topic? You'll have all the opportunity to discuss the forecast tomorrow at the courthouse session, and public members of the Budget Committee, you're welcome to tune in. And as well as when you get the budget, this will be the first 3 or 4 hours, first hour at least will be my budget presentation. We'll go over the forecast there too. So if we could move on, I'd ask for that, please.
Yeah, what's up next, Gary?
All right, I want to talk about the budget approach and prepare you for the budget presentation format and the calendar dates that are upcoming. We have 7 minutes to do it. So Elizabeth, please go ahead.
Sandra Montoya, our budget manager, please.
Okay, thank you. So we wanted to share the budget manual that was given to staff. It does include the calendar dates. Please note that we have had to make one change in the date. Originally, June 17th was going to be the budget adoption by the BCC, and that was pointed out to us as actually observation of Juneteenth. And so we have moved the budget date to June 10th. And the secondary optional date will be June 24th. So other than that change on the calendar, and Blaze, if you'll get to the calendar page, that is the only change in the calendar dates that we have at this time. The budget manual does identify budget policies and guiding principles. And as we scroll through, you'll be able to see the assumptions that were built into the budget, as well as what we are calling the hybrid approach. Member Feely asked about the approach specifically, and what we asked staff to do is we adjusted wages by the CPI index of 1.8%. And then beyond that, we said materials and services were to remain flat, and cost allocations were also held flat. This was in consideration of the fact that we would not be bringing fees to the BCC at the regular meetings, which normally happen in May. And the reason for that is we're just introducing the new system and we're short of time. So the introduction of OpenGov and the new chart of accounts and the upgrades to our financial systems are all colliding to make it difficult to bring everything forth on a normal schedule. So in recognition of that, we purposely held cost flat, and we instructed the departments to do that. We also instructed departments to look at a 3-year average. So in the system now, OpenGov, we have the ability to include a reference year that's the 3-year average, and departments were asked to build their budget with that in mind. Is historically, what are your needs? Because normally a budget is built on if we could have everything that we needed in order to operate, this is what it would be, and then we grow that incrementally. That's the traditional budget approach. And yet we know that revenues are not keeping pace with expenses, and every year we have attrition and we have vacancies that cause lower costs. And so our actuals year over year come in lower than that as the ideal plan. And so with the 3-year average, that gives us more of a realistic view. And we ask departments, please consider that when you're building your budgets. That doesn't mean that we're asking you to cut programs, because thankfully our projected estimates of revenue showed fairly healthy trend lines. Not anything aggressive, but certainly not in a cut scenario. So departments were asked to consider that as they built their budgets, and we called this approach the hybrid approach. So that is what was built into the budget manual, and the rest of the budget manual is pretty standard instructions for entering their budgets into OpenGov. So with that, I wanted to make sure we give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have on that document.
Any questions for the presenter so far? No, go ahead.
So in the last 4 minutes, we just wanted to give you an introduction to the slide presentations that you will be seeing in May. So every department currently is working on the slide presentation. It really does follow the pattern of last year. We tried to jam-pack a lot of information in a very short time. So we're asking departments to be mindful of that and really be consistent in the format that we share it with you, so that with each presentation, you're not having to relearn. You already have it in front of you. You'll be accustomed to it, and we will just go through department at a time. With the new chart of account structure, we group things. So for example, public safety, all the departments that are public safety are grouped together, and that is the plan, is that we will present them to you in that sort of a grouping. And so you'll see, like I said, public safety, general government, I'm trying to think of some of the others, infrastructure, you'll see those groupings together in May. And Blaze, if you want to just run through those slides really quick.
There's no time, Sandra.
I'm trying to be mindful of the time.
No time, Sandra. Let's skip that, please.
Okay. I believe, Gary, the rest of the slides are just the dashboards. It's the FTE, it's the overtime, so it's the reports that we've committed to sharing with you at every budget committee meeting. And I'll leave the floor open to your questions.
Great. If I may quickly, Budget Committee members, you will receive the proposed budget on Friday, May 14th. That's the next date. That's important for you. Friday, May 14th. If you want a paper copy, let Sandra or Elizabeth know. Otherwise, it will be electronic only. The week of May 24th to 28th, please hold. That will be the budget meetings and hearing week, all week long. We are going to hold that in person and hybrid. I highly recommend you attend in person. It will be in the board hearing room where we're sitting right now. There's room for all of you, especially the public members. If public members, you are not comfortable being in person, please let us know. Of course, you could do it remotely, but I respectfully suggest you'll miss out because being in person, especially for this type of a meeting, it was really key. Our staff will be presenting in person as well. That's just my suggestion to you. But the next key date is May 14th. That's when you'll receive your proposed budget. We have 1 minute left if you have any questions, anyone.
Oh my gosh, 1 minute.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate our volunteers and our budget committee, our citizen members. Feel free to email if you have any questions. This session has ended for today. Thank you all for your votes and your hard work. Gary, what's up next?
Well done, Finance team. Thank you. All right, the next session is Esticata Vertical Housing Development Zone. We have staff from County Council's Office and Business and Community Services. And I believe it's Nate and John. And guests from the city of Esticata. So whoever's starting, please kick it off and introduce our guest.
Good afternoon. Nate Boderman here, Assistant County Counsel. I'm going to be brief, for just a minute or two, just to frame the issue for you today, because the purpose of the session today really is to allow staff from the city of Esticata to explain a proposed vertical housing development zone that would apply to new development in downtown Esticata. So along those lines, we're joined by Matt Lorenzen, city's economic development manager, who will be making a short presentation, be available to answer any questions you might have. Also, John Lagarza from Business Community Services here. I want to make sure why we're clear why the board's involved in this particular decision, because at the end of the day, it is an economic development tool that applies within city limits. As I explained in the staff report, the purpose of the vertical housing development zone is to encourage development of mixed-use, multi-unit housing above commercial spaces, and that's done by providing a partial tax exemption on qualifying projects. Now, this tax exemption would decrease potential revenue that special districts in the county would receive from these qualifying projects. Now, there's a number of special districts in the county, right? Everything from fire districts to water districts, and all these would be impacted by this potential tax exemption. And state law gives each of these special districts the option of opting out of this program, opting out of participating in this vertical housing development zone. Now, the Board of County Commissioners, you sit as the governing body of two districts in particular that would be affected by this vertical housing development zone. The Library District and the 4-H and Extension Service Districts. So it falls to you to decide whether these districts should participate with the City of Esticata in this program. So again, I just want to be clear that you're not wearing your hat as the County Board of Commissioners for the next 30 minutes, but rather you're sitting as the governing body of the Library District, you're sitting as the governing body of the 4-H and Extension District. And we could have scheduled these as two separate sessions, but frankly, the issue is the same as applied to both of these districts, and we trust that you can keep your responsibilities and duties to each district separate and make a decision that's in the best interest of each of those districts. So, with that introduction out of the way, I'm going to throw it over to Matt so he can explain the city's proposal and go from there.
Thank you. John, were you intending to speak before me?
I'll just say something quickly. Good afternoon, Madam Chair Smith and County Commissioners and County Smith. As Council previously pointed out, the issue before the board this afternoon is the consideration of the vertical housing tax credit zone in downtown Esticata. As the board's aware, we are in a housing crisis that is currently evidenced by the lack of available supply throughout the region, and especially within our rural cities. Additionally, we have limited resources to attract development into our rural areas due to the cost of metrics of labor and materials. This proposed vertical housing tax credit is currently being piloted in 3 cities, and through its pilot term has helped solve some of the housing shortages within 3 of our communities, and specifically increases multifamily housing supply. The housing and needs analysis for Esticata completed by Eco Northwest shows the opportunity to capture a new demand of 199 units. Ultimately, I believe the vertical housing tax credit can help solve some of the current housing shortages and provide a return on investment that is more attractive for housing developers in the rural city of Esticata. I'd like to introduce to you my colleague from the city of Esticata, Matt Lorenzen.
Thank you, John. This is not lit up. Does it need to be, or am I good to go?
It works.
Okay.
Yeah, please introduce yourself.
Thanks so much. My name is Matt Lorenzen. I'm Economic Development Manager for the City of Esticata. Chair Smith, I want to thank you and the Commission for allowing me this opportunity. I know time is short, and so I'll be as brief as possible. I did have some slides. Are those available to view, or?
Yes, Christina will help you.
Hang on a minute, we're bringing those up.
Let's see. Is this where we're starting? Oh, hold on, we'll wait until it pops up on the screen. There we go. Is this where we're starting?
I think it should be back a few pages.
Looks like that is a letter. Let me see.
Matt, why don't you just go ahead, please?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. There's only about 3 or 4 slides, so we're not missing a lot here. John already established the need for housing throughout not only the county, but the region and the state, and arguably the country, especially rental housing at affordable rents. The county commissioned a preliminary housing needs analysis that municipalities in the county were able to opt into about a year ago, and Esticata participated in that activity. One finding that came from that preliminary housing needs analysis states that about 22% of Esticata's housing stock is multifamily, compared to 32% of the housing in the Portland region. The comparatively small share of multifamily units may constrain opportunities to rent in Esticata at all income levels. So the question then, as city staff people and as land use managers for the city, we then look at a menu of options to try and solve that gap or close that gap between what the market is demanding for rental housing and what's available. Zoning and development code reform is a great starting point, and to that end, we've made major revisions to our zoning map as well as our development code in the past 18 months to clear the path for the market to bring more multifamily housing to Esticata. We've formed a committee on housing affordability and diversity, and that committee is currently discussing things like system development charge fee reform, and potentially even waivers for affordable and multifamily projects. They're considering a construction excise tax, although it looks like that may not pass muster and be dismissed, but it's an option that's been explored. Public-private partnerships would be an option, and several of the commissioners were in Esticata yesterday, which we greatly appreciate, looking at affordable housing development opportunities. Urban renewal grants and subsidies is something that we currently utilize to try and incentivize the development of multifamily housing in our downtown core. We're looking forward to partnering with the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. And then finally, there are certainly other options, but the next one sort of on that menu is a vertical housing development zone. So hopefully you've had an opportunity to review the memo that I provided, and it kind of gives some basics of what this means. But in Canby, Milwaukee, Oregon City, they already have these zones, and they're attractive because they encourage the development of mixed-use development in a city's urban core. It would be a partial tax exemption. So this is not a full tax exemption, and indeed, it's well designed in the statutes so that taxing districts are not negatively impacted. That is to say The current assessed value that's on the rolls is never removed from the rolls. That will always be taxed. It's the new improvements and the new development that enjoys a partial tax exemption to the tune usually of 20% exemption per floor of development above the ground floor. So there's land value, there's the ground floor that's taxed, existing value. It's the additional stories of residential development that enjoys a potential tax abatement. This program is not specifically for low-income housing, although it could be used for low-income housing, and in such a case, there would be a greater abatement available to a developer. But it's meant to just encourage multifamily housing generally, especially in a city's urban core. I mentioned that there's no negative impact on taxing districts. It's just foregone revenue rather than lost revenue. The abatement period is for 10 years. And to wrap up my thoughts, I've just provided a case study, which you see on your screen. Maybe a case study is not the right word to use, but this is a development that's trying to occur in downtown Esticata right now as we speak. On Main Street, you can see the basics of the project there as well as what it might look like. About 7,800 square feet with 6 apartments and some commercial space facing Main Street. The final page in the deck that you've been provided is something that I did not create. This was created by the assessor's office, and I'm very appreciative of them and the time they took to put this together. They've highlighted what foregone taxes might look like annually to the special districts, and you can see that for this particular project, granted not all projects are going to be identical, but for this particular one, the foregone revenues are quite nominal. And I would make the argument that this partial tax abatement has the ability to move the needle for the developer in moving a project potentially from the red to the black in operating costs. And for the taxing districts, the comparative effect is really negligible, at least from where I stand and from my perspective. That isn't to say we would minimize any potential concerns, but I would hope for the county and the special taxing district's support in trying to alleviate some of the housing crisis, especially here specifically in Esticata, at a relatively minimal cost to the districts. So with that, I'll conclude and I guess ask for questions.
I have a few questions on this. Projects like this always give me a lot of heartburn because our citizens are reliant upon and or have passed all these taxes here. Some have not been passed by the voters. And whereas you say that the future tax revenue is negligible, I would submit the Esticata School District is taking almost a $2,300 hit. And that doesn't really sound like a lot of money when you're building these multi-million-dollar projects to provide housing to another sector of society. I submit to you, several kids in the school district are not going to receive some type of service because that $2,300 has disappeared. Likewise, it goes same for our fire departments. Maybe they're going to put off buying tires on one of their rigs for a year. I don't know. That's why I don't like these projects. I have never liked them. I consider them to be wholly dishonest, very dishonest to our citizens. And I have spoken on this the last time I was a commissioner. And back then we called it urban renewal, but now it has a different name, but it does the same thing. It takes away tax revenue. Will the citizens in the area where this is affected be asked to vote whether they want this district or not, or is it already a done deal?
It's certainly not a done deal. The city council would adopt this through a resolution, so it would be done through representative democracy rather than direct democracy. I'll just maybe note one other thing regarding your comments with the school district. Unfortunately, I don't have the email to provide you today, but when I sent the noticing letter, which we're statutorily required to do, to all the districts, I received only one letter in reply, and it was the Esticata School District applauding our efforts to incentivize the construction and development of multifamily housing.
And that brings me to another issue. I have not heard from anybody as chair of this commission. I have not heard from anybody in Esticata who supports this. And so to me, this is a staff-driven situation. And you know what, Martha? You're in the queue, and I already know what you're going to say, but it doesn't matter. The chair has not received from the mayor, from the city councils, from the school district, that this is a good idea. And what I want to know today, Stephen or Gary, maybe you can help me on this. If we accept the recommendation to go forward on this, what does that mean exactly? It says here, recommendation, the city of Esticata wants us to vote for option 1, to participate in the vertical housing development zone on behalf of all county districts, which the Board of County Commissioners is the governing body. That language in itself is very disturbing to me. It says all. Does that mean it's a county-wide situation? Does it mean it's just impacted in there? And then what's our participation? Our participation is not defined in this. What the heck does that mean?
Mr. Boderman, we have 2 districts at hand here, correct?
We do. Library District and the County 4-H and Extension District.
What?
So the County Library District and the Extension and 4-H District. I'm not sure if I got those straight or not, but 2 special districts at the end of the day. This isn't on behalf of the county generally. You aren't the governing body of the Esticata School District or the Fire District. It is those 2 limited special districts for library and extension services.
That are what?
That are at issue. And so
They're county-wide, that's why they're at issue.
Okay, so those county-wide districts will be affected by building housing in Clackamas, in Esticata, correct?
that is correct.
Okay, have they chimed in on this or no?
Well, you're the governing body.
Okay, so, I'm having a lot of heartburn over this. I know this has been teed up for a while, but I kept waiting for this. I just don't like these particular projects. And boy, I tell you what, my light board is lighting up like a Christmas tree for my commissioners, and I love it. Martha, you were in the queue first.
I was just going to say, Chair Smith, Commissioner Savas and I and Commissioner Schull, we visited Esticata yesterday. It was for looking at another piece of property that may be used, that we looked at with our housing authority.
Louder, Martha.
That we looked at with our housing authority. We did speak to the folks in Esticata about this, or they gave us a heads up that they were coming tomorrow. We don't have to, I don't know how essential the timeline is, but we could see if the entities that you've mentioned are okay with this.
If who?
If the entities, we could talk to the library district folks, we can talk to the, or suggest that Esticata talk to them as well. I frankly don't share the same level of heartburn that you do, but I know you've been pretty consistent, so I'm not saying that. But I think we should at least give it an opportunity, if not today, maybe to get some of your questions answered.
Commissioner Schull, thank you for that, Commissioner Schrader. Commissioner Schull.
Yes, if this were to be approved and if these property taxes were to be abated for that project, the total effect on the library district countywide and the 4-H district would be relatively small, okay? It's Matt.
Correct.
Matt, this project, the intent of this is to attract a developer who will build a free market project, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
It could be affordable or market rate.
Okay, but it could attract a developer who would be willing to do a free market project, given the 10-year abatement, to produce housing in Esticata that would offer low, middle, and some higher units in the project of 199 units, right? To attract like a full spectrum of your Esticata residents, citizens. Is that right?
If I'm understanding you correctly, I think everything you've said is accurate.
Yeah, okay. To me, if, one last question. If, without the abatement, what is Esticata's chances of getting a developer to build a project of 199 units, free market?
199 units.
Isn't that what you said this would be?
This development that I gave you as a case study is for 6 units.
No, but I'm talking about the vertical high-rise thing. We're talking about going
No, the
multi-story,
Commissioner
correct?
Scholl, the EcoWest study shows there's ability to get to 199 units in Esticata. So the project that Matt was trying to show is a 6-unit project to be able to start that project. So in order to recruit some development and interest, that would be a catalytic starter by doing this to help them come into Esticata there.
Okay, and a project like that's going to be built over a long, you
it's
could
gonna
build
take-
over a long period of time, right?
Absolutely, Commissioner Hill. It's going to take years for the development to be built out to fill up the need, but this is a way for us to have a tool to get some development started in Esticata.
If I may, although it's possible that a developer would come and build a large-scale project, it's quite unlikely, given Esticata's market dynamics. And so we expect that if or when developers take advantage of this tax abatement program, they would be projects of a similar scale to what I was showing you about this Main Street project. 6 to 10 units on a mixed-use development that would be in a downtown urban environment. The built environment in downtown Esticata would not allow for the construction of hundreds of units because there's already buildings existing on most all of the lots. So this would be, in most cases, redevelopment of existing structures or potentially new development on small Main Street style sites.
Okay,
Is that, anything more?
I'm good, thanks.
Christina, we have somebody in the queue.
Commissioner Fisher?
Commissioner Fisher.
So how I understand this is a projected development with 6 units that would allow for a potential 20% reduction in the tax revenue that would be on top of what is already currently being paid in property taxes for 10 years. Is that right?
Yes, so the potential abatement for the proposed project I showed you would be 20% of the assessed value associated with that upper residential story. Everything else.
And then after 10 years, the whole building goes back on the full assessed, or whatever that is, RMV. I don't know what that is. I'm just thinking of my tax statement. And we get to decide if we want to do that, right? This governing body.
For the 2 districts in question.
Oh, for the 2 districts in question. Okay, so we don't get to, or could we suggest that if we're going to support that, then like one of the units needs to be, like do a mixed income type of situation? So if 20% of the units, which would be 1 unit in this scenario, would need to be affordable to incomes of like 40 to 80% of, or 60 to 80% of AMI.
Oregon statutes, as I understand them, does give pretty broad license to the local jurisdiction to create rules governing their specific vertical housing development zone. So theoretically, you could make that recommendation and it could be included in the city's rules for this program. I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to that. I would just maybe add that in trying to incentivize housing at all levels, to add complexity to this for a developer may act as a deterrent instead of an incentive, but tough to know.
It would be a cost-benefit analysis
Sure.
as to how much tax revenue would be saved over the 10-year abatement period, and what would it cost to subsidize 1 unit to make it affordable? I mean, I don't know what those numbers would be, but it's It's a math problem. I'm just thinking, from a public policy perspective, if the public is going to subsidize housing, the public should get what it wants out of it. And we know that we have a serious housing crisis, and it's all levels. It's not just the lower income, it's middle income. It's the whole spectrum of availability of housing. So, I don't know, I kind of like this idea in the sense that it's balanced in that the jurisdictions still get the foundation, so they're not taking a cut as you would in an urban renewal district where it is tax increment financing. This is much different than that. And would get a public good. And we do need, and to talk to any developer about even just building a house, by the time you even get, you pay the system development charges, and then all of that to even get to, before you even do construction, it's just so expensive. So any type of public-private incentivizing, I think, we have to look at that, because we do have a housing crisis.
Thank you. Who is in the queue, Christina?
Commissioner Savas.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I have a question and I have a comment. So Matt, what's the position from the fire district?
So we've noticed with this identical letter that we sent to all of the taxing districts and received no comments back from any taxing districts other than the school district. And again, that was an email communication, informal in nature, just saying way to go. But no other comment even from Esticata Fire.
Okay, and that letter was submitted how long ago?
I'd have to double check. Just one moment.
Yes, Nate.
I guess I'll just add, just based on the timing in the statute, if the fire district, or any special district for that matter, hasn't objected by this point, then they've automatically opted in.
Okay. So here's my comment, and if you would just indulge me slightly. Chair Smith, you probably remember back in the day in your first term, the conversations and the significant math that I shared, and I think even the fire districts had shared. And this isn't urban renewal, but it's similar. And the beauty about this is it's 10 years and it's done. It's not 20 years and can be extended. And the concern about the fire districts at the time was, they knew that there was an ROI on this. They knew it wasn't. They knew that they would get a return on it. The districts, that it would actually be a benefit. But their worry, their fret was, most especially if it was extended beyond the 20 years. That's where they thought they would not reap the benefits. So what we did was we did an early return of the monies we had accrued, the tax base we accrued, and so they benefited from that at an earlier period of time. So what I would like to say is that this is 10 years. If the fire district, who is usually very keen on the math on this, is not opposed this, then I think we should not be alarmed either, typically. Now, I can go through the deep math and share that. We certainly don't have the time, but the return on investment, because of the halo effect and the buildup of assessed value, brings up the whole area. High tides rise all ships, so to speak. That basic concept works. So what might look as, and this again for the districts that we're here to approve today or not, it's minimal. I mean, it's far cheaper to forego this than it is to put any other kind of incentive in place. That mathematically, this is probably going to be a good thing. I don't have any heartburn with it, and you have to do the math to understand that the benefit after the 10 years is greater than the monies expended in the first 10 years.
So I'm going to make a comment here. This could be for market rate housing as well, correct?
That's correct.
So in essence, what we're doing, and I don't have to do the math on this, Commissioner Savas, is we're subsidizing a builder for market rate housing on the backs of Clackamas County taxpayers who think that their taxes are buying one thing, but in fact, they're lining the pockets of somebody else. The taxes are being diverted to another. I think we are feeding a beast that will never be satisfied. I remain no on this. I'm going to move right now that we opt out of this, and we consider it at a later date when we can have some more information brought to this. And maybe the citizens of Esticata can let us know what they think. The taxing districts, their mayor, their city council, I think, need to participate in this, and the county commissioners, I do not believe, and I don't like the wording of the option that we're asked to do. There's a motion on the table, Matt, and it either needs to be seconded or not. I'm moving that we opt out today.
That we opt out.
I have a question.
Commissioner Scholl is in the queue. Just a minute, Paul.
Chair Smith, may I ask a question?
Yes, you can.
Look, my question is this. If this were to be approved and the property tax abatement goes into effect, how could we be assured that the savings will be passed on to your citizens in Esticata who want to rent or buy one of these projects? How does it actually, how can we be sure that your intent to provide housing that's more affordable, how can we be sure that it's going to get passed down to Mr. and Mrs. Jones and other folks who want to either rent or buy one of these properties?
Excuse me, there's a motion on the table. It either needs to be seconded, or it needs to be amended, or it dies. That is the procedure we do here today. Do I hear a second? The motion dies for lack of a second. Now, do you want to continue with your questions? Matt?
Thank you for the question. Your question is, how are we assured that a renter would enjoy the financial benefit of this abatement that is being
Or at least
granted?
part of it, a significant part of it.
Yeah, so, and then Commissioner Savis also was making comments regarding mathematics, and if I may comment maybe on both simultaneously. Point 5 in my memo, I'm just going to go ahead and read it directly. It says, the reality is that there's a large disconnect between the development and construction costs and the rents that can be collected in a rural community. In other words, the market rents are too low and cannot generate an acceptable rate of return on an investor or developer's investment. Construction costs in Esticata are the same as they are in Portland, if not higher because of the distance and drive for contractors and subcontractors. Yet rents in Esticata are significantly lower. A project that pencils in urban Clackamas County or Portland simply does not pencil in Esticata. There has to be a way to decrease the development or the operating costs for an investor or developer in order to build a project in Esticata. We're not seeing the construction of multifamily in our downtown or our city at all because it doesn't pencil out. We're not talking about lining the pockets of anyone. We're talking about getting a project just to pencil so that it's not in the red. There has to be a way to decrease either development costs or operating costs in order to get a project into the black, and this is one tool in the toolbox that might be able to help get us there.
Chair Smith, one more question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yesterday, when I was out and had the tour, which I appreciated very much, you have that new housing development that we walked through. Okay. Some of those houses are offered at the low 300,000, which is probably pretty good for the in relationship to the rest of the region. Did you have some sort of break to those developers who did that project?
There was no public participation in that development.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Christina, somebody's in the queue.
Commissioner Savis.
Commissioner Savis, you're up.
Yeah, I'm going to have a different way of replying to Commissioner Scholl's question. How would a person renting one of these units benefit? I would say because of the math and the rents in the urban area or in other parts of the area, that having a place, because the rents in Esticata are typically more affordable than they are, in most of the rest of the county, that there would be a place for someone to rent at a more affordable rate. So there's a direct benefit for the fact that it exists and exists at a lower rent. That is a tangible benefit right off the bat. So I have a question for Mr. Boderman. Mr. Boderman, if the Board of County Commissioners takes no position, does that basically default just like the fire district?
That's correct. So statutorily, if you do not respond, if the board does not respond, then you have been deemed to have opted in. And so the only question really is if you want to opt out, and if you do, then we send written notice to Esticata along those lines.
So what does participate mean? Nobody's answered that question. Does it mean we give you money? Do we give you staff time? Do we give you all the stuff, Mr. Esticata man, that you guys can't afford, but you want the county to pay for it? Is that what you're asking by participate?
Participate would simply, in this case, mean not opting out.
That's all.
In the form of a tax abatement.
But what about any other areas they may need help in?
Well, the only question before you, as far as this session is concerned, is whether to opt in or opt out of the tax abatement program for the library district and extension. And those apply to qualifying projects.
You know, we're trying to get a couple libraries built in this county, of which this board is having to pay for. So we keep building everything else except for what we're obligated to do, to build. That's just what I'm saying. You know, board, you do what you want. If it comes to a vote for today, I vote no. I will remain resolute. I will be consistent in that I think this is not an honest approach because, again, we're subsidizing housing on the backs of our taxpayers who think their money is going to one program and it's being diverted. I don't care if it's 5 cents or $500. At some point, we have to start paying attention. Now, our budget was upside down for 2 years, right, Gary? And it's because you guys went line by line and saved $500 here, $1,000 here, to get us to right sizing. And, you know, it's, you know, all that's just lost because, you know, because my program is worthy and we're going to help all the people who need housing. We're going to help everybody else and da-da-da-da. So if my board wants to go for it, board, you go for it. I will vote no on this. Do what you want. I seem to be on the losing end of this in several things today, but that's the way it works.
I'm sorry if I'm breaking rules here. May I make one last comment? I'm here at the direction of our city council. You were hoping for the local folks to show some support of this, and I'm here at the direction of the city council.
You know, Matt, you have done very good today. I have to admit you've held your own and you have answered the questions wonderfully. I appreciate your participation in this today. I know what your assignment is. I'm a little bit perturbed by the fact that we invited the local governments from the city of Esticata and they couldn't even come to show up and make an appeal for their own project. And it makes me wonder if they really want it or not, or they're just sitting around. I don't know what they're doing. But you know, we have 16 cities in this county, and I think, you know, if our cities want something from us, they should at least let us know we want this, at least let the chair know that they would like to have this program. But Gary, what's up?
All right, so unless someone's going to make a motion, we can just end this, but no action means that you're in. You're approving it with no action.
Commissioner Fisher, are you in the queue?
Yeah.
Go.
Well, I think Commissioner Savas was in the queue before me.
Well, you're being called on, do it. Just say so.
So my concern with this, I echo Commissioner Scholl's question in that I think that as people that are elected as county commissioners, and we are responsible to our constituents and our taxpayers, that to define what the public gets out of the tax abatement is important. And I really understand the economic and market indicators here. But if it could be part of the conversation to say that at least 20% of the units or something, just a conversation would be at 60 to 80% of AMI to be subsidized, at least one unit, I think that would be better public policy. One thing that we did do, and Happy Valley came to us and wanted us to approve their urban renewal district, we said, okay, but you're going to have so many, so much of a percentage be housing that's affordable to people. And that was part of that consideration, because if you're going to reduce taxes, it's good for the public to have some benefit. And I get the market stuff, but I think that Commissioner Scholl's question is a good one. So I don't know if that's something that can be taken back. So that's my first point. My second point is I like what Commissioner Schrader said, that if we were to proceed with this, I think it's important to go, we have advisory boards with our extension service, we have advisory boards with our library district, and to say, how do you think about this? Now, when I look at the numbers, I'm like, okay, so it's almost 2,000 a year, right, that is abated. Is that, how am I seeing that right? So over the course of this, so 2,000 times 10 is $20,000. So it's not a whole lot of tax abatement that is being provided. But I just think those couple things I think they're important.
Commissioner Scholl, you're up.
Chair Smith, may I make a motion?
Sure.
I move to defer any decision at this time with a direction to county staff and city representatives to provide more information to assist with a future decision.
I'll second that. Discussion on the motion. I see commissioners are in the queue. I'm offering up discussion on the motion. Schrader, do you have on the motion?
Really wasn't on the motion.
I know, but I'm taking comments
I
on the
won't-
motion is the
so I
rules
will
that we
not-
operate under.
I will not say a word. I am torn on this because it's a local city council that knows their people and they know their own area. And a little bit for me on the motion deferring it is, we've got to trust our fellow folks who know their communities. But if we defer it and get some answers, as long as it doesn't kill it, that's kind of where I am with this, okay? So.
Christina, who's in the queue?
Commissioner Savas?
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, before the motion was made, the comment I wanted to make,
Okay.
and I think it's relevant to everything we do from here out, and that is that bondholders who buy municipal bonds, who look at projects like these, buy them because they know that they are going to make money. So when people buy the bond, they take their money out of their bank and they buy those bonds. And so it's not the greatest analogy, but I would say that this is, for the $2,000 over a course of 10 years, this is an investment that will pay dividends similar to a muni bond. And it's not, and I say that as far as the return on investment, as far as the analogy. So it's in housing, it's a very safe bet. So it's very clear to me that there's a misunderstanding of the math. I'll just say that. And if people understood it, they would see that this is not a big deal. This is a benefit. It is not a cost to the county.
Any more comments on Commissioner Fisher?
If we defer, then that means that we're not opposing, that means it goes through, correct?
No.
Nate?
So we had presented the option to defer with the understanding that if you needed more information to make that decision, we could answer specific questions that you might have. But I want to bring up a couple points. One, the city of Esticata is May 10th. Is that correct, Matt, that the city is?
I believe so.
Okay. So the city has a separate process to actually implement this zone. And so time is somewhat of the essence to provide the city some guidance as to whether, these two special districts are in or out. And two, statutorily, the service districts are obligated to give the city an answer one way or the other in a timely fashion. Now, the city has agreed to extend so that we can hold this session, and so we would need additional consent from the city to extend further. I don't assume that would be an issue provided.
Okay, I'm going to call for a vote right now, and we're going to Christina. Please call the poll, and then we'll decide what to do after that.
Okay, Commissioner Fisher?
No.
Commissioner Savas?
I'm, yes,
Commissioner Schrader?
Well, I think we should make a decision today. I'm going to vote no, but I think it's going to go the other way, so.
Commissioner Scholl
Yes.
and Chair Smith.
Yes, motion passes 3-2. What's up next, Gary, on this particular item, or Nate?
So what happens next then, Nate, on this?
Well, I would encourage the board to come back at their next earliest convenience and let us know exactly what questions you need answered to make a decision. Because again, the city is looking at a May 10th hearing date to implement the zone, and the county's more or less on the clock to make a decision one way or the other. The default can be to opt out. I don't think that that's necessarily the direction that I'm hearing from the board, but if you don't say anything, you're in. I mean, that's just the way that the statute's set up, and so.
Well, then just do that. We don't need another session.
Well, that was the direction that the board just provided.
Well, we declined any decision at this time. Didn't we do number 4?
The intent of number 4 was to come back at a later time to answer any questions that you might have.
And if we don't do that, what happens, Nate?
If you don't do that and you don't respond to the city, then you have by default opted into the program. You're a participant in the program. The tax abatement would stand as applied to the library district and extension.
Well, there you go. Christina, there's somebody in the queue.
Commissioner Fisher has her hand raised.
Commissioner Fisher.
So I'm a little bit confused now, but I voted no because Commissioner Savas, who voted yes, persuaded me that this would be a decision point today, and I was okay moving forward given the May 10th and just the economics of it. It's $2,000 a year across all these districts. It really does make sense given Esticata's special plight and the city council had made this request, and that's highly persuasive for me. So I'm okay moving forward or just opting out so that we don't say anything and that it goes through by default. I mean, of course, I will always be an advocate for mixed income housing, every opportunity. We'll hope that that message gets carried along, but I would not want to stop this because of that. And we are the library district in the 40th district, so I'm okay with that. It's such a minuscule amount of money.
Yeah, I'm just going to agree with Commissioner Fisher, so.
Okay, well, then you know what? If we take no further action, then you guys can go do what you want.
Right?
so I have a Robert's Rules question. Is it wiser for us just to table the matter, or is it wiser for us to reconsider and then table the matter?
Well, we've already had a motion, and what we can do, we can end this session, correct, Gary, and go
Yes.
on to the next session. And Robert's Rules does not figure into whether this district goes ahead or not.
No. I'm just saying that if we wanted to table the matter, can we just simply table the matter, or should we reconsider and then table the matter?
Gary?
All right, I'm looking at my Roberts Rules cheat sheet. Technically, you should have done that while the motion was still on the table. The motion's already been voted on and approved, so you're done.
Okay.
So it's really too late to table it because you've already taken action.
Are you in the queue?
Right, but there is the option of reconsidering during the same session.
Yes, someone can make a new motion to either reverse what you just did or
I
something.
move to reconsider.
Second.
Oh, we've done this many times before, Commissioner Shaw. You'll get used to it.
This is an allowable motion. It's to take back for review. There is debate. It is not amendable.
Okay.
So
So we need a vote to reconsider. We need to.
there's been a motion and a second, so discussion and then vote on the motion, which is to bring this back for review.
Are we reconsidering the past vote?
Yes.
Yes.
We're not we are not,
Reconsideration of the past vote.
the past vote, we are not reconsidering the project. Oh, honestly. Christina, take the poll.
Okay, Commissioner Fisher?
Yes.
Commissioner Savas?
Yes.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye, this is deja vu on so many levels.
Commissioner Scholl? I believe Commissioner Schrader said aye, correct?
I said aye.
Aye, okay.
Abstain.
Okay, and Chair Smith?
No.
So it carries.
Okay.
The
So
motion passes.
I now move to table the matter.
I'll second.
What was that, Paul?
Move to table.
Paul wants to move to table. He made a motion to move to table the issue
And I'll
at
second.
a later date.
I'll second.
And Martha has seconded. Let's take the poll. We're not going to discuss it. We've discussed it enough. Christina, please take the poll.
Commissioner Fisher?
I'm sorry, I don't know what this means. Does this mean that
We'll
we'll
just-
just go through if we do nothing?
It means we're not making a decision, I think, so we'll go through.
Oh, so it will?
So ultimately, what you're, I'm jumping, let's be transparent. You're basically taking no action, so it's going to go through.
Okay, yes.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl?
I guess.
Chair Smith?
Aye, passes 5-0. Thank you very much, staff, for coming forward today. Commissioners, we are going to take a 5-minute break before our next session.
Thank you, Chair Smith.
You betcha.
Thank you, County Commissioners.
Using my gavel here, go ahead. All righty. The Board of County Commissioners have returned to their policy session on April 20. Gary, what's up next?
All right, the final policy session today is vehicle registration fee outreach discussion. Commissioners, you asked for this session. Staff had some questions. We're here to hear your responses. Dan Johnson, Mike Besner from Transportation and Development will kick it off. Please make it short, and then let's hear what the board has to say. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair Smith, Commissioners, and Administrator Schmidt. It's a lovely day when I get to start the day with you and end the day with you. So,
Yes, it is. Thank you.
I'm going to make this as brief as possible. We're joined by Sue Hildick as well from PGA in case there's some questions about public engagement. What I'm going to speak to and the points I'm going to speak to are directly from the presentation materials you got in your packet, from the packet itself. And I want to take some time to kind of highlight kind of the approach that we took in regards to public outreach kind of before, during, and after, and then ask some clarifying questions and hear from all of you about what your ideas might be and what you might like to see. So with that, it's important to understand that before the VRF was approved, staff conducted extensive outreach with residents throughout the county to discuss the need for the VRF and how the funds would be used, and listened to the comments and answered questions. That included 11 presentations, 7 to community groups hosted by our partners with the Clackamas County Committee for Community Improvement and/or local CPOs, 3 to business groups hosted by Chambers of the Business Alliance, and 1 to a city council, which we were there by invitation. Meetings were also held geographically spread throughout Clackamas County in unincorporated areas of the county, Clackamas, Oak Grove, Redland, and Welches, and in incorporated areas of the county, specifically Esticata, Milwaukee, Molalla, and Oregon City. Moving forward, since February of 2019, there has continued to be steady outreach about the VRF, the process for determining which projects will be funded, and the revenue with the revenue from the VRF. This outreach included 6 public meetings in Clackamas, Oak Grove, Lake Oswego, Beaver Creek, Welches, and Molalla, online public surveys, the creation and implementation of the Community Road Fund Advisory Committee as a new county ABC. This committee met 6 times. It's important to understand this committee was made up of members of our citizens of Clackamas County that were geographically spread throughout the county. It was important to us. And the committee met 6 times in 2019 to develop initial recommendations and has met twice since then for updates. These meetings are publicized and are open to the public. There's been articles in county publications, including the quarterly, now twice a year newsletter mailed to addresses across the county. Website information, I bring to you as a visual. This is all the website information that is on our website regarding the Community Road Fund. In addition to social media posts, presentations to business organizations, CPOs, and other groups about the VRF in general and specific projects funded by the VRF revenue. Since the VRF revenue went into effect in January 2020, outreach has continued to take place to let folks know how the revenue is being spent and is planned to be spent to ensure accountability and transparency to the public. The county's VRF revenue goes into the new Community Road Fund, which is a separate dedicated fund, which we promote and help people easily see what projects are funded by this new fee. Ongoing outreach includes, obviously, the website, which you referenced a second ago. We have done presentations to CPOs and other community groups. We've done clear CRF branding on projects and notification postcards, social media, websites, et cetera. There have been articles in county print and electric publications, informative project signage to ensure individuals or citizens of Clackamas County know the funding sources for these various projects that are being brought forward. And And in fact, we have direct communications with citizens of Clackamas County who have concerns about this. I am pleased to announce to all of you that DMV has the direct line for Mr. Michael Besner to my left right here, who they forward any question from any Clackamas County citizen who may have issue or concern with VRF, the VRF fee, so we can answer those questions specifically. I would note that there aren't many inquiries. We get less than a couple a month, but there continues to be a common thread around the VRF associated with trailers. And I think that the staff is going to be bringing forward a discussion to the Board of County Commissioners about the possibility to reduce some of that fee on some trailers.
Define trailers, Dan.
So you've got the way the current statute works, you have to pay VRF for your motorized vehicles and trailers. What's happened, though, is there are some trailers where you may not have to pay, you may not have to register, but people are choosing to register.
Like farm trailers to haul hay, or are we talking about travel trailers?
Not travel trailers.
Not travel trailers,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of other kinds of trailers.
Equipment trailers, now when you haul heavy equipment, that's a whole different licensing mechanism.
Correct. And there's the ability for us to establish a new fee for that or adjust that fee. And so we're probably going to bring that back for the board to consider, I think, at a future date, because I think it was the intent of the board, and the board's looking for flexibility in some of these areas, so we'll queue that up for a future discussion.
Got it.
Okay? So with that, here's kind of where, we sit back and we listen to all the good direction the Board of County Commissioners are going to give us. Beginning in January 21, the Board of County Commissioners had several discussions about the future of the VRF. Basically, we're here to basically have more clarity around the purpose of the outreach, the audience, time frame for the outreach, role of specific stakeholders, meaning cities, C4, the Community Road Fund Advisory Committee, Traffic Safety Commission. All of those have been involved in the implementation of the program. And obviously to clearly state that we continue to support those ways that we are currently coordinating with our community, the website, answering questions, meeting with public organizations should they have questions. But again, we are here to kind of have a discussion with you about what additional outreach you might like to see. And then with that, I turn over to the Board of County Commissioners to have a discussion.
Comments? Commissioner, Christina, who is that?
Commissioner Savas.
Commissioner Savas, you're in the queue.
Well, yeah, so I just want to lay it out like this. So when we did the first outreach in 18 and 19, and then the following outreach right after the board approved it in February of 2019, all of that outreach amounted to the folks in Clackamas County knowing that the VRF was implemented, and then here was what they would get for that. And so if someone lived nearby a potential project that was identified, or wanted to see congestion projects, or those who wanted public safety transportation projects, we expedited the ADA, ADA ramp program, moved that up faster and a faster timeline. A number of things that people might be passionate about if they lived in unincorporated Clackamas County or Canby, Esticata, wherever it may be. The people we reached out to that were in favor of it, knew what they were going to get, and some of those who were initially against it, got a little bit warmer and fuzzier about it when they realized they were going to get something for it. Some people who were against it are still against it today, so I get that. But everyone was left with the impression that that we would get something for those dollars spent, whether they liked it or not. They would get some benefit, road maintenance, so on. So with that said, if the board's going to consider putting on the ballot, and it has the risk of being overturned, if you will, reversed, I think the public should now be educated, or we should do outreach to let them know what those impacts are. And I, for one, who pay a lot of registration fees, and others who have paid registration fees, want to know what's going to be funded, what's going to happen with the money that we've paid in. I mean, it was triggered by one person who said, well, do I get my money back? If you're not going to build the project that I'm passionate about, do I get my money back? And I guess, I think someone said, maybe it was Commissioner Smith said, no, you don't get your money back. Well, I don't know that. We don't know that. So that's one purpose. I think the fact that we're changing direction, I think we need to do outreach to them, to all these people that had the feeling or had the knowledge that we were going to move forward because it had already been approved. So that's one reason right there. And I want to know what all the impacts are with regards to, do we slow down the ADA ramp project? You know, what are the impacts, and what are the impacts within the cities? And so I think even the mayors that I've spoken to and the city councilors that I've spoken to, and I've spoken to someone from every city, you know, they want to understand that as well, how it's going to impact where they live or where they work, or their travel in between and some of those roads. So we promise congestion relief, we promise safety. So that's one element to your first question, Dan.
Commissioner Scholl, you're in the queue.
Yes. The reason we're talking about this today is because despite the work that the county did to get the word out before the VRF was implemented, a lot of people felt like they still didn't know about it, and it was a surprise. And so there's a lot of consternation. So that's why it came up at the end of February. We talked about it again. What I would like to see is a concise briefing, not somebody hired to, not a consultant to take care of this, but some sort of concise briefing. And Dan Johnson had some slides that would have been a good piece of that showed what you get for your vehicle road
map.
feed slide, and here's what would happen if it goes away. And that sent out to CPOs, city councils, mayors, newspapers. He's already got detailed information on it on his website, on the county website. And then give it a period of time to let that percolate out through the county, and then schedule a couple of hearings and see what people say. And after that, determine whether or not it needs to go to the ballot, or maybe we find out that people say, wait a minute, now I finally realize what those dollars are really doing for us, and maybe we want to just stay with that. Maybe the VRF becomes, I'm not saying they'll say this, but maybe the VRF becomes a good way to sustain roads in the view of our citizens.
Commissioner Fisher, are you up?
Yeah, thank you. So Dan, Mike, Sue, everyone, thank you so much for just revisiting all of the extensive work that went into putting together the vehicle registration fee. The piece that I'm interested in is looking at the bigger picture beyond the VRF. Really, if we're going to engage our public, we've got other issues that we need to be looking at. I just did an experiment last week when the Pamplin media came out with their title of their article is "Commission Falls Short of Opposing Tolling." And I went, what? I don't support tolling. This is unfair for Clackamas. And so I just put a little thing just on my little commissioner page that just put that article up there and just asked what people thought. And oh my gosh, I haven't had so much engagement on that issue, and also information sharing. So I just think that the whole bigger issue of which was framed up in that policy session about how we cannot rely on the gas tax. We can't use county general fund for roads. We're prohibited from that. We have to look at, as not only a county, but as a state, how are we going to fund the transportation infrastructure that we want? This issue is bigger than the VRF. And with the moving parts at the federal level, our engagement needs to be public. What do you think we should be advocating for with our federal delegation? This is what Congressman DeFazio is proposing. This is what's on the table. Should we support this? We need to really be engaging bigger. This train, in my mind, has left the station. And we have other issues that we need to be looking at that are bigger than this. Rick Cook, who is at the Stafford Hamlet, gave us an email that talked about just sort of parsing out the cost of the VRF coming down to, I wonder if I can find it here. Probably not, because I'm not so good at my computer. Oh, for less than a cup of coffee, and he just did the math of 30 divided by 12, $250 per month to drive my car in Clackamas County. Pretty good deal, I think. And we're going to get Stafford Road improvements. You know, that's really important. There's really dangerous parts of the county that this VRF funding is going for, and that is one that he mentions. So that's my 2 cents. I don't want to revisit this issue, but there are other advisory votes that we may want to send out to the voters, and what will that look like? And we got to do the hard work to figure out where we're moving our community in transportation.
Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, I've got to be, I'm going to just be direct. I'm really not interested, colleagues, in revisiting this. We made the tough choice. It's doing really good projects. It's, one of the reasons.
Mike?
One of the reasons I supported it.
Can't hear.
Sorry. Okay, here we go. Sorry. I said, I'm not really interested in revisiting this. We made a tough choice. It was the previous commission. I think the projects were well vetted. One of the reasons I voted for it is I kind of get up on my rural soapbox every so often and don't really feel as if our rural community is getting what they need. And I think what swayed me in particular to take that risk with that vote was largely because I saw a bunch of projects that those areas are other areas that to me are completely underserved in so many levels, are actually getting something from it. I don't mind people coming here to give us input, but just personally, I can't support revisiting, and I think we just need to move forward.
Well,
and it's okay if I'm in the minority, I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Commissioners,
Wait a minute.
we,
Shut it off. Sorry.
yeah, okay. This was brought forth by Commissioner Savas. Personally, I'm not the least bit interested in doing outreach unless we have an outcome. And that outcome is that we're going to, interested in repealing the VRF, and that is allowing our citizens the right to vote, and they were denied that right. That's why I'm bringing it forward again, that I allowed this session to come on. We're not going to direct staff to go out and spend their staff time and all this money with no end goal in sight. And the end goal in sight on this is to repeal the VRF. If there is not the will of the board to agree to that today and do the outreach, there's no sense in having staff do outreach. So that's where we're at. So I'm going to make a motion. And the motion is
Chair, I
going
have my hand up.
Yeah, well, that's nice, Paul. I'm going to make a motion, and the motion is this. We only do outreach. We only direct staff to do outreach if indeed the end goal of this outreach, regardless of the conclusions, regardless of the data, is that we offer this up to a vote to the citizens to either repeal or continue with the VRF. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, now we can have discussion. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, so similar to Commissioner Fisher, I have gotten substantial feedback from people, not just from our discussion last week, but ever since this whole topic's been broached. And there's something else, and I gave actually Dan a list of questions that I heard from the public. And I'm not going to list all those today, but one of them that I didn't list, this came up to me over the weekend, was, so if it gets repealed, it'll go back to $43 a year, right? I said, no, it won't. So I challenge any of my colleagues to
That's part of the outreach, isn't it?
ask if they understand why it won't go back to $43 a year. Does everyone know the reason why?
No, it's great you're telling us, though.
And so therefore, if we can't answer that question, then we need to do the outreach to make sure people understand what's going to happen if indeed the voters say, you know what, we don't want to do it, because if we do this and they say no, and it doesn't go back to $86 over 2 years, or 43 times 2, and it doesn't go back, they're going to be upset.
Dan, will you answer that question? Or Stephen, I don't care who wants, Mike?
Well, I think the reason is because the state's registration fee has gone up since the county did theirs.
Well, it
so-
is, and it's continuing to go up based upon when your car registration is due. So Commissioner Savas, you are at least partly inaccurate in that. Vehicle registration fees are going to continue to rise over the next year because this was implemented in January of 2020, they started collecting on it, the state vehicle registration fee, depending on when, because it's a 2-year registration in Oregon. That's a confusing item here, 2-year registration fee. So, yeah, we could repeal this and go back, but at least there will be a reduction in the county vehicle registration fee. Dan?
I just want to make one point of clarification. There's no increase on the county's portion of that. Ours is still set at the $30 a year.
What do you mean? What are you talking about?
So you were talking about the increases that were occurring because of HB 2017,
Yeah.
which is an accurate statement at the state level. Ours, there was never, ever a plan to increase the county's portion of that. There was
Yeah, I know.
There was some confusion at the last study session. I want to make sure we're on the record for that.
Right. Thank you for that very much.
Yeah, the point of me bringing that up is that I didn't ask the question, so it doesn't really matter if the person who asked the question is right or wrong. The fact of the matter is that people are under the understanding that it's going to go back to $43 a year. Part of the reason is that some of the people are upset is because the increases is not because of the county registration fee. The increases that Dan and Mike just spoke to is because of the state increases. So that's, and then there's going to be people upset because some of these projects that were listed aren't going to be built if it gets repealed, or done. So therefore, the purpose of the outreach is simply to inform people what's going to happen and what's not going to happen. And to put something on the ballot with a confused, uninformed electorate is unfair to them.
I'm not asking for that, Paul.
Because of an action.
Paul, you're making an accusation that is totally unfounded here. I'm asking this board to consider if we're going to do outreach, the end of the outreach is to refer the vehicle registration. I'm not interested in any staff members going out to the public saying, oh, we raised your vehicle registration fee, look at all the goodies you get. That's not the purpose of this whatsoever. If we're going to have staff do outreach, commissioners, it's going to be with the end result in mind. There is a motion on the floor. We can either vote it up or down.
What end result, Chair? Because that's not clear to me what the outreach is. And nor the duration of the outreach and what the purpose is. So without a definition of what the outreach is, Chair, I'm at a loss because we haven't given that definition. You're rushing to a vote without defining the outreach.
That's exactly, I am not rushing to a vote for the outreach. The purpose of the outreach is to determine whether the vehicle registration fee should be voted on the citizens. That's where this whole thing started when we did the straw poll. It was voted down.
Well, your motion's not clear to me. Could you repeat the motion?
I didn't hear that, what?
Your motion is not clear to me. Could you repeat it? Because I'm confused.
Can somebody repeat the motion?
I did. You want to?
I got it.
Wants to go? All right, Christina, go ahead.
Chair Smith motion for outreach only if there's an end goal to offer the citizens to vote to repeal or continue the VRF.
And we will know and I think that is very clear. Thank you, Christina. I think that is very clear because at the end of our outreach, we will determine, oh, maybe the voters want to keep and that's the question we ask, which gets a yes vote. Voters, do you want to keep the vehicle registration fee because of all these projects? They could vote yes. Or at the end of our outreach, we could determine, would you want to repeal the vehicle registration fee, of which could also be a yes vote. It all depends on how you ask the question, and it all depends on what our outreach conclusion is on this. But the whole reason for this is the voters were denied their right to vote on this. And I'm going to go back to the voters. I'm going to go back to the taxpayers on every single issue that comes before this board. I did that on the Esticata housing, vertical housing. I'm going to do this on this particular issue. I'm going to do it on every single issue that becomes before the board because, commissioners, we get really dangerous when we assume and we start playing with people's taxpayers' money that we think we know better than our taxpayers do. And one of the reasons there's such angst about this is what ODOT is doing, raise the vehicle registration fees in the legislature. They're raising gas taxes, and our gas tax is going to be raised by ODOT again. When, Dan? In a year or two?
Funding for HB 2017 is a combination of a variety of things, and that maxes out, I think, in 2025, 26.
Sometime around then.
Yeah,
It keeps
so
stepping up.
we're getting more pressure for increased fees and gas taxes for our roads. This is an opportunity for Clackamas County citizens to be able to express themselves in relation to everything else that is going on. Do you have a comment, Mark?
No, I'm just shaking my head. That's,
Oh,
I agree.
Christina, somebody's in the queue?
Commissioner Fisher.
Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chair Smith. I just wanted to explain why I'm going to vote no on your motion, because I respect your motion very much, and I don't know if when we went through all of this way back when, if I would have done something differently when we supported the VRF, because your arguments are very, very persuasive, and I think that it's really important to engage our electorate. But in my mind, this train has left the station. I appreciated you doing the straw poll when you were looking at what was the appetite of this commission to move forward on this issue, and the clear answer was no, we were not going to revisit this with the electorate. I thought that was good leadership on your part. I support that. I don't want to move forward with this. I do support us continuing to engage through our methods of engagement. We have virtual town halls, we have other things. I want this topic, not necessarily the VRF, but the larger issue of transportation to be on the table. So with that, I will be a no vote on your motion, but out of the deepest respect for the process you've been trying to lead.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Commissioner, do we have anybody else?
Commissioner Savas.
Commissioner Savas, you're in the queue.
Yeah, well, on that now, I've got to respond to Commissioner Fisher. I want to just clarify that the statement I read then, I'll read now, I've read several times since. So it may have been clear for you and your decision and your vote, but it was not clear for mine. So I'm going to read the statement I read several times. I am interested in hearing from key stakeholders on a potential repeal of the VRF and the concept of putting a more effective VRF methodology forward that could include a ballot measure. So that's where I was then, that's where I am today. And really my vote is really contingent on the level of outreach and making sure, and this is where I need some legal opinion, making sure that this is not advocacy one way or another, because the outreach shouldn't be about advocacy. It should be about educating folks and knowing what they're going to get and what they're not going to get. And I don't want people out there thinking that the registration fees to go back to $43 or $86 for 2 years.
And I think that's part of the outreach.
We're going to get in the hot water for.
You know, Paul, nobody's saying that. In fact, you're the only one that's saying that. That is part of the outreach. But I maintain we are not going to have outreach unless staff knows exactly why we're having the outreach and what the outcome is going to be. So, Commissioners, there is a motion on the table. I'm going to call for the poll. Christina.
Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, I'm going to abstain.
Okay, Commissioner Savas?
I'm going to abstain until there's better definition of the outreach.
No, maybe I'll vote.
Commissioner Schrader?
Well, I'm going to vote no because I feel like we're beating a dead horse, guys.
Yeah.
And, I'll get baskets.
Just vote, Commissioners. You've said enough. We're taking a vote. We're not taking a vote and then qualifying it 16 ways to Sunday. Can we just take the vote?
I just wanted to say I'm okay
You
getting
can later. Thank you.
tomatoes thrown at me.
Commissioner
Chair.
Yes.
And Chair Smith?
Aye. The motion fails. C, 2-1-2, I believe. Thank you. Okay.
So Chair, we're here today for the work session on what the outreach is going to be. So can we get back to that? Because that was the discussion we had on
No, we
March
can't.
2nd. We still have
Can I make a
that.
motion to table this conversation only because there's another meeting we have in 5 minutes?
Yes. Okay,
And
what
you
is
don't need
that?
to
What
table
is
it.
that meeting?
You need to defer.
Gary, what is it? What is table mean, Gary? Doesn't mean that we're.
No, what is the meeting in 5 minutes?
Children's safety.
Yeah, it's the children's, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, well, our meetings are going along today. Okay, if we want to
Okay, yeah.
move to table this, it's going to be at the purview of the chair when this is scheduled. This probably won't be scheduled for a while yet because there's other county business that really rises to the level of precedence over this. I suggest we just adjourn this meeting, Gary, and there's not going to be any outreach unless we have a directed outcome for that, and I'm very, very serious about that. With that in mind, I'm going to adjourn today's meetings. Thank you, commissioners, for all your comments. Thank you, staff. You have worked very hard on this. Meeting adjourned.